Once again, Assalamu alaikum everyone, and a very good morning to all of you. My name is Zishan Salahuddin. I serve as the Director of Growth at the Tabadla, and I'll be your Master of Ceremonies for this morning. We are here for the launch of Pakistan's country economic memorandum, from swimming in sand to high and sustainable growth. But before we get into the proceedings, I would like to request my colleague, Mr. Ubaid Majidi, to start us off with a tilawat from the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا أعطيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر صدق الله العظيم شكرا.
Thank you, Ubaid. As I said, we are here this morning for the launch of Pakistan's Country Economic Memorandum by the World Bank, hosted by Tabadla. I'm going to invite to the stage Mr. Matthew Verghis in just a bit. The purpose of this report, as you will find out through two panel discussions, an opening note and a presentation by Gonzalo, is to take a detailed look at productivity, investment, female labor force participation, as well as what are some of the transformative reforms that are the quagmire that it finds itself in at the moment. Mr. Matthew Verghis, I will now like to call up on the stage for the opening remarks. He is the World Bank's Regional Director for Equitable Growth, Finance, and Institutions Practice. Matthew?
Good morning. It's a little bit intimidating to have this blown up behind me. Thank you all. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. As was mentioned, I've started this job as the South Asia Regional Director for the bank, covering a number of economic issues. But one of the real privileges of this job for me is this chance to come here to Pakistan. I grew up in India, and I realized when I came here that almost all my life I've been wanting to come to Pakistan and some of the other neighboring countries and never had an opportunity. And, it's been a real privilege for me to be here the last few days. I'm hoping to come back and travel more to see more of this beautiful country. It's also, I think, a particularly apropos event for me as well that we have here today. We are launching what we call a country economic memorandum. It's called From Swimming in Sand to High and Sustainable Growth. So one of the things I've learned is that we have a creative team, and this is one of the more creative names we have for our country economic memorandums, but a very apropos one. From swimming in sand to high and sustainable growth. So it's a growth study that looks at how Pakistan can move to a more sustainable, high-level growth path. This, by the way, is a topic that's of particular interest to me and interest to all of us at the World Bank, because we are in a time when countries throughout the world are coming under increasing macroeconomic stress. So Pakistan, we know, is one of those, but by no means the only one, even within South Asia. And South Asia is not the only region that's subject to this. You know, the combination of the events that started with the pandemic and then the shift to high inflation and high interest rates is going to create macroeconomic pressures going forward. Pakistan and a few other countries, Sri Lanka comes notably to mind, are under particular stress. And at times like this, there's a lot of attention paid to how countries can get through the immediate macroeconomic pressures that they are under. And that's inevitable and natural, and it's the first priority. It's the necessary precondition. But I always remember two things at this time. The first is that usually the measures that will get you through the macroeconomic crisis are not, they will get you through the macroeconomic crisis, but typically they buy you time. They buy you 6 months or a year, and if nothing else changes, then you're back to where you started again. You know, that's the cycle. That's the less pessimistic lesson that we've learned. The more optimistic lesson that we've learned, which is what brings us to this report, is that in several cases, when countries were in real trouble, that's when they were real macroeconomic trouble, that's when they were able to put in place changes that then laid the foundation for 25 years or 30 years of growth. Sri Lanka in the 1970s under J.B. Jayawardene, to the extent where even though Sri Lanka is in trouble now, Sri Lanka's per capita income is still significantly higher than India. India itself in 1991, many of you will remember, had to send their gold reserves to England so that the English would provide as collateral, so the English would provide. So it was an even starker situation than we have in Pakistan. The East Asian countries, the Asian financial crisis, Turkey in 1999, these were all countries that hit real macroeconomic crisis, used the opportunity to put in place broad-based reforms that went far beyond dealing with the immediate macroeconomic crisis. And that led to 20, 30 years of sustained growth that put them in a different income bracket. You know, if you work at the World Bank and you work in development, you have to be an optimist. And you have to believe that tomorrow can be better than today, and that can be true in Pakistan as well. So this report in some ways is our own contribution to that. And some ideas that we think are the kinds of changes that, if implemented, would lead to periods of sustained growth. We've had a great team working on this over here. I'm coming towards the end of the process, but I'm very much enjoying learning about it. And I'm looking forward very much to the discussion that we're going to have the rest of this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I would like to now call upon Gonzalo Varela, who is the Senior Economist for Macroeconomics, Trade and Investment Practice at the World Bank. He is going to give a brief presentation on the report itself and its salient findings. Gonzalo.
Here. It's a pleasure for me to present the main findings of this growth report, this country economic memorandum. There was a big team that worked on this report. My co-team leader, Zara Aslam, is also here. I'm very happy that she could make it to Pakistan for this launch, but also a broader team that worked for quite some time on this. So let me go directly to the 10 main findings that I would like to highlight to you in this event. And for that, if I can get the presentation on. And perhaps the way to start is with the framework that we put forward to think about the challenge of growth in Pakistan. And if the slides start moving, that will help. Next. And so basically the premise of this report is that Pakistan's growth has been stunted by its inability to allocate its resources and its talent to the best productive uses. And this inability is very much related to a number of distortions. Distortions that were introduced by policy, but also distortions that were not introduced by policy, but were unaddressed by policies. So for example, tax policies. Tax policies can be forms of distortions if they allocate resources in a suboptimal way. One of the things that we see in Pakistan is that because taxes on land and property are negligible, but taxes on more dynamic tradable sectors are much higher, that gives an incentive for resources to be allocated into less productive activities, mainly real estate, and fewer resources to be allocated into more productive activities, tradables, etc. So that shapes those incentives that are in a way distortions, shape the production structure of the country. It means that the returns that you get from an inflated real estate sector create demand for imports, whereas the limited resources that go into dynamic tradable sectors also create demand for imports because a lot of those investments are in inward-oriented sectors, and only a limited portion create a supply of exports. So as the economy grows, demand for imports grow, but the supply of exports only grows in a limited way. So what that leaves us is in a situation in which we accumulate external vulnerabilities. So we accumulate current account deficits that when financing, external financing dries up, it is difficult to afford. And that basically what it does is it puts us in a situation of a balance of payments crisis that constrains our ability to grow sustainably. So that is, in fact, something similar to what we are seeing these days. So those external vulnerabilities mounting. So the focus of this report, as if it was mentioned, is on three things, three important things that are at the core of the growth process. The first one is productivity. And so we look at productivity dynamics in Pakistan, productivity dynamics for firms and for farms in agriculture and their determinants. We also look at investment. We look at the way firms grow through investment, and we look at the role that foreign direct investment can have in boosting that growth. And then finally, we look at the allocation of talent, and in particular, we look at the issue of female labor force participation in Pakistan. That is an important challenge that the country faces to move into a path of high and sustainable growth. So let me start with our main results on productivity. Productivity is a key ingredient of sustainable growth. If you look internationally, cross-country experience shows that differences in standards of living end up being attributable mostly to differences in productivity. So understanding what drives productivity and how can we boost it is crucial if we are thinking about increasing incomes. So the first thing that we find in our report is that aggregate productivity in Pakistan has been stagnant and more recently actually declining. So let me give you just one statistic to illustrate this. Over the past 30 years, the average Pakistani worker increased its productivity by 40%. Over the same period, the Vietnamese average worker increased its productivity by 330%. So the productivity of the average Vietnamese worker increased 8 times faster, meaning that also likely the average income of that Vietnamese worker increased 8 times faster than that in Pakistan. So because of that quite stark finding, we went a little bit more into detail on the dynamics of productivity. And so what we did was we looked at the firm level for the past decade, what was happening with productivity in manufacturing in Pakistan. If you think about productivity growth, you can think about basically 2 channels through which productivity can grow. So for a given level of productivity of firms, productivity grows if you allocate resources away from low productivity activities into high productivity activities. So that's what we call an allocative channel, a between firm channel. If less productive firms shrink, release resources for more productive firms to expand. That increases allocative efficiency, increases overall productivity. But there's also another channel through which productivity can increase. Given the allocation of resources, firms can become more productive themselves, so they can do things better, they can organize production processes better, and so within firm productivity can also increase. So we decompose for Pakistan's manufacturing sector over the past 10 decades that productivity growth. What you can see is that overall it has been declining. But why was it been declining? Is it an allocative problem? Is it a within firm problem? So what we find is that most of the decline can be attributed to within firm factors. So firms getting worse at what they do. So that's what drives, on average, the decline in productivity, with allocative factors, that is the light green bars in that chart, contributing positively, but less and less so over the period. So an important question here is then, why is this happening? So if productivity is declining and productivity is crucial, then what can we do about it? And to understand what we can do about it, we need to understand what drives this productivity decline. And so the second finding of this report is that declining productivity can be traced back to trade policy distortions that have been increasing over time. And let me mention one in particular. A key factor has been that import duties on intermediates that are crucial for firms to produce according to their technological sets, import duties on intermediates have been increasing. So what we find when we look at the data is that a 10% increase on import duties on intermediates reduces productivity by 6% of firms that use those intermediates intensively. So if you make it more difficult for firms to access key inputs they need to produce, then these firms are going to see their productivity decline. Over the past decade, unfortunately, import duties on intermediates in Pakistan increased across all sectors by about 50%. So if you put this together, what you end up is with that duty increase on intermediates accounting for almost 85% of the productivity decline that we see in manufacturing over the past 10 years. Now, there's another channel through which trade policy distortions affect also productivity. And this has to do with the incentives to export. So high import duties, what they do when they are applying a final good is they prevent import competition. By preventing import competition, it gives additional profits, we call supernormal profits, to firms that are operating domestically and focusing on the domestic market, because the competition from imports is cut. What that does is it introduces an incentive for firms to focus on the domestic market. In a way, an import duty acts as an export tax. It is called import duty, but it acts like an export tax. And we see that in the data. So in the data, what we did was we checked what is the export orientation of firms that operate in low protection sectors in Pakistan. And that you see in the dark green bar. And the export orientation of firms that operate in high protection sectors. And that you see in the light green bar. And what you see is that the export orientation is higher for firms that operate in low protection sectors. Why? Because they have more incentives to export, because the domestic market is not all that attractive. There's more competition. So that makes sense. Our analysis also shows that when the government decides to introduce an import duty of 10%, that increases the profit margin of selling that product, in which there's an import duty of 10%, in the domestic market by 40%. So that's a pretty powerful incentive. Import duties are pretty powerful incentives not to export. So they are, in a way, export taxes. And because exporting is good for productivity growth, import duties that act as export taxes penalize productivity. The third finding I wanted to share today is what is happening with productivity in agriculture. Agriculture is a very important sector for the Pakistan economy, and so understanding what is happening there also matters. So the first thing that we did, this with colleagues from LAMS, was looking at crop productivity over the past 30 years. Again, looking at a long period of time, 3 decades, crop productivity, what is it happening there? And what we see is a heterogeneous picture depending on the provinces. We see important declines in crop productivity in KP and Balochistan, and mild increases in Punjab and Sindh. And so, again, we want to go a little bit more in detail, and so what we do is we look at what is happening at the farm level. So if we look at farms and we try to examine how the productivity is evolving. For that, we are putting the magnifying glass on Punjab, for which we had farm level data, and we do a similar decomposition we did for manufacturing. We say, how much of the productivity dynamic that we see in farms in Punjab is because allocation got better or worse, or because farms got better at what they did or worse. And what we see in farms is the opposite of what we see in manufacturing. We see, yes, aggregate productivity declines, but those aggregate productivity declines are because of allocative factors, and that's what the gray bars show in the negative. across different crops, cotton, rice, sugarcane, and wheat, what we see is that farms that are less efficient somehow get larger, and the ones that are more efficient get smaller. So that's an allocative problem. That's a misallocation of resources, and it's pointing to a number of allocative distortions in agriculture that are acting as a drag on productivity growth. The other drag on productivity growth that we see for agriculture is climate change. Climate change used to be a threat, now it's a reality. We see more and more, we see temperatures expected to rise in Pakistan and weather events, extreme weather events becoming more frequent. We examine the role that climate variations have on productivity in agriculture, particularly with focus on wheat crops in Punjab, and we see that extreme weather events and weather variability has sizable effects on productivity in agriculture, which points to the importance of investing in climate-resilient, climate-smart interventions for agriculture. Let me now move to the second section of the report and share 3 more findings on this. Investment and firms' growth. This is very much related to the productivity story. What do we see here? So, finding 5 from the report. What we see here is that Pakistani firms tend to be small and struggle to grow. And what they show is what we call a limited up or out dynamic. In dynamic economies, what you see is that firms eventually either grow or exit the market. Whereas in Pakistan, what you see is that firms remain small for a long period of time. The chart that you have here on the left shows the evolution of size of firms over their life cycle. And you see that as firms grow old, they don't grow large. The line in green is the same for the United States. And so you see that in the US, firms as they grow old, they also grow large. The ones that don't grow large exit the market, releasing resources for others to grow. And that's why what we see when we examine the size distribution of firms in Pakistan, particularly for the export sector, is that firms in Pakistan, exporters in Pakistan, are relatively small, which is a challenge if there are economies of scale. We see that the average Pakistani firm, for example, exported on average $1.5 million in 2021, compared to the average Bangladeshi firm that exported $3.8 million over the same period. Again, if there are economies of scale, so if firms get more productive as they get larger, this is a challenge also. So this growth challenge is a challenge for productivity. And the other challenge has to do with distortions in the allocation of credit that may preserve some uncompetitive loss-making firms in the market for too long. Finding 6 tells us that there are many firms in Pakistan that are systematically loss-making. When a firm has been making systematic losses for a period of 3 years or more, we call that zombie firms. So that's a term that is used in the literature. These zombie firms are firms that for a long period of time make losses. What we find in Pakistan among publicly listed firms is that 1 in 10 are zombie firms. And if you look more closely and say, what about family-owned firms and state-owned enterprises, the number then, that proportion increases to 1 in 4. 1 in 4 state-owned enterprises or family-owned firms actually are what we call zombie firms, firms that incur losses for at least 3 periods consecutively. This points to a challenge with how credit is allocated. How is it that these firms that are systematically loss-making keep resources locked in, labor, capital, without releasing to other companies that could be more vibrant, more productive? So that is pointing to some distortions in how credit is allocated and perhaps some challenges associated with insolvency laws. Finding number 7 is about FDI. If we look at cross-country experience, one of the things that we see is that export takeoffs or productivity takeoffs, particularly in emerging economies, have been inevitably associated with a lot of foreign direct investment coming in the market and creating export platforms. In Pakistan, we don't see that. What we see is that foreign direct investment inflows remain low. For the last 5 years, we have an average of 0.8% of GDP in FDI inflows, declining and mostly inward-oriented, not looking to export, but instead to serve the domestic market. We also estimate in the report that the potential, this is an average potential, it's not the highest possible, it's an average. Given the characteristics of Pakistan, there are 2.8 billion of additional FDI inflows that are left on the table that could be coming into Pakistan with the right promotion, with the right policies, but that is untapped. And that's an important thing. It's an important thing because FDI can be a platform for productivity growth and can be a good source of financing in a country that is saving scarce. We find that multinationals are 46% more productive than domestic firms, but more importantly, multinationals can create positive spillovers by interacting with domestic firms. More FDI leads to limited, but some productivity spillovers in Pakistan, and we find in particular that when FDI in services sectors increased by 20%, productivity in downstream firms that use these services intensively increased by 1%. Again, this is a small, very small spillover, but it's there, so there is potential. Let me say one more thing about FDI. That is, FDI is also a good, stable source of financing, particularly relevant, as I mentioned before, in a country that is saving scarce. It could help finance more investment. Let me now turn to the last section of the report that is on female labor force participation. And the finding number 8 that I want to share with you is that increasing female labor force participation in Pakistan, one of the countries with the lowest female labor force participation rates, has a huge economic potential. We estimate that the economic cost of low female labor force participation is up to 23% of GDP. So if Pakistan's female labor force participation was to match the levels that we see in Bangladesh, for example, with the right labor market policies, we could accrue gains of up to 23% of GDP. So there's, again, money left on the table by not addressing the distortions that are preventing more of Pakistan's talent hitting the labor markets. And let me share one more thing. When we look at dynamics of female labor force participation, or the characteristics, or what are the main stylized facts around it, what we see is, again, labor force participation of females in Pakistan is low, but it's relatively higher when the women are in poor households. So in a way, necessity trumps gender norms that may be preventing labor force participation. So that chart shows along these deciles of the income distribution of households how high female labor force participation is. And what you see is that the poorer households are, the more female labor force participation is. Many of these are working in agriculture, actually. But then as they get richer, female labor force participation decreases quite monotonically until the richest of the households, in which is, you see, a slight increase. You see also an interesting relation when you plot female labor force participation against the level of education of women. And what you see in the left-hand side chart is that there's a U-shaped relationship between female labor force participation and the levels of education. At low levels of education, female labor force participation is relatively higher, related probably with that poverty trumping or necessity trumping gender norms, and then it gets substantially higher at very high levels of education. The interesting thing about this U-shaped relationship is that when you plot the same, but in districts in which we have good connectivity, what you see is that that U-shaped relationship mostly disappears. So with good connectivity, that's the line in green that you have on the chart on the right-hand side. More education tends to mean monotonically more female labor force participation, which may be hinting, again, a hint, to perhaps connectivity being an important factor here in reducing the misallocation of talent that the country has by keeping out of the labor force a big chunk of its population. Let me stop here with the roadmap, and then we can start a conversation. this is a roadmap that we're proposing for reforms. And there's a sequence here that is quite important. To start with, the important thing is to remove distortions or alleviate distortions as much as possible. And let me mention some. The first one, harmonize tax rates across sectors. So property taxes and land taxes should be on the table so that the pressure on the more dynamic tradable sectors is lower from a tax perspective. And so the incentives to allocate resources are more optimal, are more aligned with the dynamism of the sectors. Make trade policy work for exports and make export incentives work for diversification and innovation. Reconsider agricultural subsidies. Also, improve working conditions for women, including safe transport, just to mention one element. Once distortions are to some extent alleviated, then let's focus on facilitating firms' growth. And perhaps, instead of going through the list, I will mention the first one, that is probably one of the most important ones. Fiscal reforms are needed if the government is going to act as an enabler of a crowding in of the private sector rather than crowding out. The higher fiscal deficits, the more financing needs of the government, and so the more it absorbs credit that otherwise would be available for the private sector to grow and expand. So fiscal reforms are crucial. Insolvency laws are also crucial to help liquidate firms that are not feasible. And then the last point, link evidence to policy. Here, for example, mandate any proposal that includes tax expenditures or that includes subsidies to be fully costed before it is implemented. Strengthen feasibility analysis in PSDP processes and mandate for large PSDP projects, mandate impact evaluations to be by law requisite to move forward. So these are some ideas. I really look forward to an interesting conversation in what follows in these two panels that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo, for that very comprehensive, in-depth, and detailed presentation. I think it's very rare to see that level of involvement in Pakistan's economy by an individual who takes so much time and pride and effort in putting together not just salient findings from the report, but also the actual transformative agenda in terms of what needs to be done. And I wish and hope, this is a conversation that I was also having with my principal earlier, I wish and hope that perhaps instead of tweeting out Hail Marys or using hope as a general strategy for the country, if our ministers and our policymakers could perhaps read these reports, tweet out some of these infographics, and talk about some of these findings, perhaps we would be in a better spot than we are today. We're going to take just 2 or 3 minutes to set up the stage for the upcoming panel that focuses on productivity and investment. Just give us a minute, and we'll be right back. Just let
Rahim. Welcome to everyone. Sincere and profound thanks to many friends who've taken valuable time out of their day and week to be here. I think there's people that have flown in from different parts of the country, including Karachi, folks that have driven in from Faisalabad, folks that have come in from Lahore. I know several friends have actually left behind important things because I insisted they be here, so I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of them. I also wanted to very quickly, of course, anytime there's a stage and a mic, I can't resist, so I'm not really part of the program. And I was told that we're okay, that we're ready for the next panel, but I insisted that I have a chance to say a few things that maybe others, out of politeness, might not say, and I think Zishan sort of has already hinted at that. This morning, of course, many of us have been on our phones. We spent the late hours of last night looking for good news from the IMF mission that was here and that is leaving this morning or might have already left. I don't know if they take Emirates or they take BA or whatever flight they take. But they're now on their way home, and Nathan Porter left here very upset. I think rightly so. The way in which that process has been managed is what it is. You know, there are other venues where we can expand on how Pakistan has managed that process. But I think the value of this document is really as a longer-term playbook for how to talk to the World Bank. So even if we don't want to do any of the things that have been assigned as potential solutions to Pakistan's consistent, long-standing, interminable problems in terms of its economy, they offer a really interesting playbook for anybody that's interested in engaging with the international financial system, even if we are either very left-leaning or very right-leaning or irrationally committed to opposing things that make basic common sense. So for the folks that haven't read the document, please do read it. If the document itself is too long, and it is a long one, I think only real specialists would be interested in reading it word for word. But there's, I believe, a 20-page executive summary that explains it well. I think one of the places where I've really benefited from when I don't want to read is to go to Gonzalo's Twitter handle. He does a number of threads. He's done a couple that have been very, very useful in terms of explaining the concepts. And I'd say that this document and what the World Bank says, at least to me, is not the last word in economics. Pakistan is a very large country. It has a very rich population of experienced, insightful, intelligent economists. I think we need to rely on our own capabilities in terms of how we think through these issues, but I would repeat that one of the vital places that we can go to for understanding the conversation and how it needs to be conducted is this document. So I highly recommend it, with my sincere and profound thanks once again. Unless, Zishan, you want me to keep going, because we have a delay, partly because of traffic and partly because of other environmental factors. So I'm happy to continue standing here. That's great. I will say that among others that need to be thanked, of course, the entire World Bank team and the authors of the document. We should also thank the World Bank for allowing Tabadlab to be a part of this, and we hope that we'll be conducting and engaging in conversations about the key concepts in this document over the mid to long term. So in the coming weeks and months, many of you will receive more phone calls from me and my colleagues asking you to engage with us and have these conversations. I should also thank the Tabadlab team itself, Shahab Siddiqui, who leads our work on content and engagement, and his team, including Sara Khan and Bisma. There's several others that I can't see, but I shouldn't forget Verghis. Lots of folks that, behind the scenes help make this event what it is. One friend asked me why politicians didn't show up to the event. And my response was, because we asked them not to come. We asked one politician to come, but understandably, given the state of the IMF Pakistan talks this morning and late last night, I don't think it's a big secret as to who that was, but she was unable to make it and I think we can forgive Dr. Pasha for that slight. In any case, like I said, we hope to continue to engage with all of you for further conversations of this nature, and I'm super grateful that those that have been here since 9 a.m. and on time are here and are still with us and haven't left in a fit of impatient rage. That's it from me. I look forward to the panels and look forward to continuing to engage with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Musharraf, for articulating some of the thoughts that perhaps I would not have considered appropriate to put out into this room. But I think some of these things do need to be said out loud if we're going to have honest and blunt conversations about these things. I'd like to begin by start off the first panel, which focuses on accelerating productivity and investment and the challenges to growth that it poses. It's going to speak about productivity stagnation, the various distortions, some of which Gonzalo has already addressed, the investment challenge in Pakistan, as well as where does productivity in agriculture currently stands. Sure. Please welcome to the stage again, Mr. Matthew Verghis. We have three individuals joining Mr. Matthew. The first, Dr. Aisha Khan, is quite literally stuck in traffic outside and will be joining us in just a moment. And the moment she does, Matthew, if I may request you to kindly call her onto the stage and reintroduce her, I'd be very, very grateful. Dr. Aisha Khan has a background in business strategy, economic policy, international development, and she leads Acumen's work across Pakistan, setting strategy, overseeing investing and leadership work, and spearheading Acumen's various business development efforts. Aisha will be here with us very shortly, as I said, but we have two other tremendous panelists to speak about some of these issues. The first among them, Mr. Mossaddeq Zulkarnain, who is the chairman and CEO at Interloop Holdings. Mr. Zulkarnain, I mean, it needs no introduction, and if I were to launch into his lengthy resume, I think we would be here for the rest of the morning. But he's an entrepreneur with over 3 years of experience in leadership. And one of the most interesting things that I learned, Mr. Zulkarnain, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that of every 3 Nike socks in the world, one of them comes from you. Is that correct? Yeah. And finally, Dr. Akdas Afzal, Assistant Professor for Social Development and Policy at Habib University, if I may ask him to kindly join us on the stage. Dr. Akdas has a PhD in Economics and Social Sciences from the University of Missouri and has a focus on the relationship between economic growth and fossil fuel energy consumption in emerging economies. And he's produced some award-winning work in his field, which I'm sure he will tap into as we launch into the discussion. I will hand it on over to Matthew to lead the panel and hope to have a very fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Zishan. Can you hear me? I think so. Okay, good. So this panel goes directly to the heart of some of the questions that Gonzalo and the team have raised around how you get productivity to grow. And we now want to move from the study itself to getting some context from the real world and from the people who've been engaged in this debate for a long time. So it's a real pleasure for me to be here and to welcome both of you to this session. Musada, can I start with you?
Yes, please.
So, you know, when we do this kind of study, we spend a lot of time looking at all the problems. And sometimes it's useful then to step back and look at some of the successes. And I'm looking at you for that. So I understand that your country has been growing, exporting, innovating, including in this traceability of the supply chain, which would be something that I can imagine a lot of the countries that we work in would be very interested in. So how did you manage to grow Interloop in this, you know, with all the problems that the report sort of points to? What can public policy do to help and to create the playing field for other companies to succeed as you have done?
Thank you, Matthew. First of all, I would like to really congratulate Gonzalo and World Bank for coming up with a wonderful report. As Musharraf said, I think even if we don't try to find solutions in it, but at least it points the problems. We can see and analyze what's wrong. And unless we are willing to correct the wrongs, and I was just talking to Gonzalo before the session started, that we have been trying steroids on our economy, and we think the boom has returned, and it's not going to work unless we learn and start correcting. Trying to come to the question, and before that, like Musharraf, I have a habit of, saying things which people don't like to say. First of all, thank you for inviting me, but we were just discussing that because of various reasons, this session started 12 minutes late, and that is $88 million in productivity for the country. Just to see, so if in a country we can't, and I don't want to embarrass the host, I'm just trying to see how we, for a country like us, minutes are not important. I think they have to be important. Now coming to your question, Matthew, I would say probably we were insane, maybe. So we didn't do the things which most of the people do. When we started, we have to invest in our people. We employed young people, we trained them, nourished them, took care of them, gave them respect. And then we invested a lot in our developing the professional management. And we have sent dozens and dozens of people in the middle management to Toyota Engineering Corporation in Japan, never asked for a bond. We have sent top management to US with again with Toyota and other companies in various states to learn how efficiency and productivity can be improved. We have invested a lot into our workers. You hear in Pakistan that the workers are not productive, they are not interested. So you see, if you are not even paying them the living wage, you're not interested in paying their social security or the health benefits for their families, and you don't take care about anything they do, and then you expect that they'll be efficient on the floor. You don't even train them, you don't upskill them. So I think what we did was we not only took care of their benefits, but we also tried to give respect to everybody and give them the ownership that this is your company. And I would say that, for example, we work a lot with the Citizens Foundation, and we have around 3 dozen schools which we have. I can stop if you want to, Dr. Sabha. Let her in, and then I'll continue after he joins us.
I understand that Aisha is here. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. Please. Okay, so Matthew, that really gives so we tell the people that these schools have been built because you have worked for the company and you earned this money. This is your contribution towards the society. So the ownership is there.
Right.
And so those people give a lot back to the company. Then you see, we have never shied from investing in technology and innovation. And innovation doesn't come from the top. You have to liberate your people to do things and be ready for them to make mistakes. Only then the innovation comes in. So we have encouraged that a lot, as you said. We have a team sitting here they have developed one of its kind in the world traceability tool, which, as you mentioned, it traces the fiber from the farm, even the farmer and the ginning and all the way to the spinning. So you can digitally trace it. And so that traceability is becoming a big issue. You don't know where the origin is. And the documentation is so cumbersome. In US, for example, now they want to know where the cotton has come from. So with these tools, we have not only developed for ourselves, they can be used industry-wide. So we have done that a lot. Then you see what we have done is that on a long-term basis, in Pakistan, the firms, you see, they have a very they work on a day-to-day basis. At most, they have a yearly plan. So we have always, from the very beginning, have long-term plans, at least 5-year plans, 5-year visions. And I remember the first vision we formed was to be best in class. So we created benchmarks with firms like us all over the world for various KPIs. And we tried in those 5 years to reach those KPIs. For example, the quality, what is the financial KPIs like asset turnovers, productivities, things like those. So we worked a lot on that, and we wanted to be best in class. And also we were of the view, although we were doing just to start with just socks, which is not even a garment, it is considered an accessory. So we never were tempted to, start diversifying and becoming a group of companies or adding more things. We thought that we should have the first right of refusal in the world. We should, and it's not big because of the quantity or because of the quality. And by the grace of God, we today have the first right of refusal in the world. We produce about 4% of the total socks in the world, but we have added now other garments. And it's all because of these policies and reinvestment. We were not tempted on two things. We were not tempted, as the policy paper, to take away our earnings and invest it into real estate. We could have made more money, but we would not have built this institution. We reinvested things into the same business, and also we were very ethical from day one about our balance sheets. Now, what's hurting with other firms, as you said, why others can't do it? I think people, and rightly so, the capital is after the money, where you can make more money. So that's the policy intervention which has not happened. Not everybody would be patient and trying to have a passion to do things. So people, even if they are successful, they start diverting money to real estate. Secondly, as we see the firms, they stay small and all that. Already, as the report also says, the credit is crowded out by the government, by the SOEs, and very little credit is available. And when the people have a tendency to, evade taxes, even on the export sector where there's a turnover tax, people want to evade taxes, because if you have a healthy bottom line, you have to pay bonuses to the employees and all that. So that eats into your equity on the paper. So when you go to the bank, you won't get credit and you can't really expand. So these, we don't have, in Pakistan, we don't have patience, and we don't have long-term visions, and we don't invest in people. We don't believe in investing in technology. So these are the things I would say, and we can probably continue the discussion later.
Thank you very much. It opens up a whole host of questions actually, but I'm going to refrain so that we can move on. But I will invite myself to come and visit you, because I'd like to learn more about it.
Most welcome, always.
Aisha, I'm going to give you a couple more minutes to catch your breath.
Thank you.
Akhtas, if I can come to you.
Sure.
And it's a question that was already touched upon, I think, by Musharraf and Zishan, which is the report, we think, raises a lot of important issues and some suggestions for how to handle them. Now, my guess is that a lot of this is not news to many people in this country and in this room, actually, that some of these issues, maybe not in quite the same way, but the general ideas, I think, are quite well known. And here and elsewhere, we see that it's the political commitment to dealing with these issues that is needed. That's the starting point to be able to deal with them. Given the political climate, do you see room for a long-term reform agenda being implemented to try and accelerate productivity and bring about growth?
Thank you. First of all, thank you to Tabadla, Musharraf, Gonzalo, Varela, Mr. Benhassine for inviting me to yourself. Really interesting report. I loved your presentation. I think I completely agree with the main points of the discussion. So in trying to answer the question that you have asked me, I'm going to briefly summarize some of the points that we know about the report so far. So we are basically talking about the fact that for whatever reason, there are certain distortions in the market. right? So for example, when there is a 10% increase in import tariff, that leads to a 40% increase in profits for firms that only sell domestically. Similarly, if there is an 80% chance that a firm that is trying to get an export subsidy is going to be offering a traditional product like apparel. They are not going to get into innovation because a lot of that is connected to profits. I mean, they make 30 to 35% of their profits. So we are talking about distortions, and we would like to remove distortions from the market. Because if you remove distortions, you are going to move towards efficiency, towards optimality. Size of your economic pie is going to get bigger. You are going into get into a process of growth. But here, you know, and this is where your question comes in, I'm going to connect another market to the economic market, and that market is the political market. So my submission today to all of you is that there is a connectedness between the political market and the economic market. So we have been talking about the economic market thus far. But there is a political market that shows a lot of distortions. What is a distortion? It is monopolization of market share. It is concentration of power. It is the lack of competition. And we see that happening in the political market. We see same people getting elected to our parliament over and over and over again. So we see that. And the kind of policies then we see, which then cause distortions in the economic market, come about because they serve the interests of the people who have already monopolized the political market. So that's my first submission. And I would like to bring in the historical case study of Sweden, you know, our favorite country. Sweden, until 1870, was a very unequal place. I mean, now we know it as a utopia of social democracy, but until 1870, money literally bought votes in Sweden. How? Because your property determined how many votes you got. I mean, they had a very complex proportional representation system, and in 50% of the 54 rural towns in Sweden, one person had 50% of the votes until 1870. And as a result, what was happening in Sweden? There was a massive emigration to the United States. And that should ring some bells to people. You know, we've been hearing about so many people emigrating out of Pakistan last year, almost 1 million people. And so they decided, and they figured out that this was not going to work. And then they engaged in a process of whole-scale reform, democratic reform, providing universal suffrage, and everybody lived happily ever after. So my submission to you, sir, is that we need reform. I mean, I completely agree with the list that has been presented, but we also need reforms in the political market, which means that we need to improve the quality of our democracy. And Danny Roderick has written about it. He has labeled this a meta-institution. And we need to have specific reforms. We need to go from a plurality-based system to proportional representation. We need to have campaign finance reform. And we need to probably move towards quadratic voting. And how is this going to help Pakistan? Or how is this going to remove the distortions that the report talked about, you know, distortions in the economic market? There is a very long and old literature by Nelson and Phelps that talks about linkages between investments in human capital, basically your education, and we are not simply talking about putting more than 25 million out of school. I don't know what that number is now. I think it's much larger than 25 million now. We're simply not talking about that. We're talking about quality education so that children that are matriculating out of Pakistani schools can compete with the Finlands and the Singapores of the world. And only reforms in the political market, you know, introducing competition, bringing about high quality democracy and reforms in democracy is going to bring about pro-people policies that are going to then ensure heavy investments in human capital. And that heavy investment in human capital is going to give you technological, a higher technological quotient, and that is going to lead towards higher exports and a more complex economy. And here I'm talking not complexity, what Santa Fe Institute talks about. I'm talking complex economy in a Ricardo Hausmann idea. So that's my final submission, that there is a connectedness between the political market and the economic market that we have talked about. I mean, I know that World Bank does not like to get into advising countries how to go about managing their politics, but I think if we do not address the distortions in the political market, we are setting ourselves up for failure. And my final point is, and I would like to quote the work of, I was looking at, in the case of Sweden, Andreas Berg, who says that capitalism can only create prosperity if there is a clear separation between the economic and the political sphere. So this is my submission, that yes, we need reforms, but we need reforms in the political market as well as in the economic market. And without that, we can talk about reports, we can wish for a better Pakistan, but democracy is the only hope for this country. And many countries have failed at having a democratic transition. I mean, I understand that the quality of democracy is not very superior, but we are still more democratic than China. We are still probably more democratic than Bangladesh. And when the democratic transition question is going to come about in China or some other countries, I don't know how they are going to perform. We have already achieved that transition. It's not a very high quality democracy, but we need to make it better. And that probably is the only hope of how we can remove distortions from the economic market, invest in our people, increase our human capital, and then export more and make high quality, high value exports. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A really broad set of issues that, yes, I think complement the report very nicely. Aisha, are you ready?
I am ready. Can you guys all hear me? Perfect.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You were introduced.
Morning.
Good morning. You were introduced. We all know who you are now, so we'll skip that part if that's okay.
That is perfectly fine.
Okay. So one of the findings of the report is that firms in Pakistan tend to stay small. They don't grow, and that would be the ideal situation. But one of the ways that you have dynamism in the economy is that when something is not working, when firms are not working, that there's a way that they shut down or they pivot or something so that you don't keep perpetuating inefficiency. And what the report is arguing is that is also not happening. So you have a lot of firms that are continuing that probably shouldn't be continuing, and that there's something in the ecosystem that's both preventing firms from growing, but then also allowing them to survive probably well past, longer than they should. So the question is whether you agree with this, and whether what you think is driving it and what you think can be done about it. So,
Great. Thank you for that question. And first of all, good morning, everyone. I think I echoed the theme in my morning commute here, sort of path that should have taken 5 minutes, talk about swimming in sand, due to all sorts of unexpected road blockages and constructions and security checks. So really, I am reflecting the theme of today in everything that I've been through so far. So thank you for indulging me and letting me arrive late to this really wonderful event. I went through this report, and truly exceptional. I want to really congratulate the Bad Lab and the authors of this for not only pulling together really exceptional quality of work, but coming up with conclusions that are actionable and that lead to more conversations which are needed. So with that, I'll switch to what you were asking about. And in essence, it's really talking about the SME sector and how do we think through the growth there, and is it growing? Is it growing as much as it should be? Why is it not growing? And you know, I'll go back. I have an economist on this panel with me, and then I have Zulkarnain Saab, who really, again, exemplifies the best of what corporate Pakistan can do. If we step back, globally, SMEs are the engine of growth. We know that. We refer to the out-of-school children, but let's also talk about our population that is constantly growing. There are no jobs around. So without these smaller enterprises that are growing, that are emerging, there will be no jobs to support this growing population. There will be no growth. So at their core, for any growing economy, they need to grow and thrive. And what we constantly hear is they're not growing as much because they don't get access to credit. And then we turn to the banking sector and we say, well, in fact, I read yesterday a former governor of the state bank really chastised the banks and said, banks are terrible, they're only lending to the government, the majority of your exposure is to treasuries, and that is absolutely right. SME share of private credit at this point is barely 7%. Now, as a former banker, I can look at that, and one explanation is banks are greedy and all they want to do is get risk-free returns on treasuries, which is fair enough. Banks are profit-making entities. Another version, another way of looking at this is that it's extraordinarily hard to lend to SMEs. And it's hard because SMEs are largely undocumented, largely informal, largely under the radar. So getting back to your question of why are they small? In many cases, they're deliberately small because there are all sorts of incentives in place for them to remain under the radar, avoid paying taxes, and remain undocumented. So again, in my space, when I look at them as a risk-taking impact investor, I'll tell you this is how the SME universe plays out. So the vast majority of them are single proprietorship, completely undocumented. It's one person standing somewhere with a little shop and saying this is an SME, and they might be doing a turnover of hundreds of millions of rupees, by the way, but it's tiny, it's undocumented. You go slightly above that and you look at, here's a company that may actually be accessing credit in a meaningful way. And you look at that structure and they'll say, oh, we're really well structured. We have an HR head. And you're like, okay, who's your HR head? Let's get him. The HR head is the cousin. Then the head of technology is the uncle. Then the head of marketing is another brother who comes in. So basically, it's the entire family. I'm like, really? So I'm going to put money into this enterprise, have absolutely no clarity in terms of what the processes and systems are in place that are going to protect the capital coming in. And so that decision becomes harder and harder. For those of us who are investing in Pakistan and who are investing in SMEs, part of the cost of doing this work, and for us, this is what we do, is paying for the diligence of actually verifying the numbers. And so when I look at our sector, which is agriculture, I was interviewing someone recently who wanted to come in and do this work and, really excited by the whole idea of we're going to be doing private equity deals and looking at numbers. And I said, you know what? Actually, you'll be going to a poultry farm and counting the chickens yourself. And he was like, what do you mean counting the chickens? I was like, no, you will have to go count the chickens. If it's a dairy plant, you'll have to go look at the cows, count the cows, and kind of stand there and measure the yield yourself. And he stared at me and he said, but I used to be at Goldman, and that's not how we do private equity. And I was like, well, welcome to Pakistan, and this is what it means. So if we step back again, this is echoing so many of the themes in which the incentives in the system, we absolutely need SMEs to grow. We absolutely need to make sure that credit is extended to them, because without that, again, as I mentioned, jobs won't be created, the economy won't grow, but there is a clear incentive in the gaps we have in our taxation regimes and the ways in which we're measuring incomes for these small businesses to remain small, to remain under the radar. So until we're able to address that, until we're able to show that there's a benefit to transparency and accountability, that, if you actually do formalize and you do set up structures, again, what Interloop is doing is an example to all of these smaller players, but it comes at a cost. It comes at a belief that says, we're going to sacrifice this short-term gain from remaining small and undocumented in clusters. And by the way, a lot of them operate in small clusters. And when I hear things like unprofitable businesses remain in play, one of the questions I have is, do we have the numbers right? Are they really unprofitable? Because if they are unprofitable, they won't be able to sustain operations, right? So often it is this question of accountability, transparency. So it starts from getting the incentives around the system more aligned with the outcomes we want. We can all go blue in the face and say, we really want to extend credit, banks should do this. Banks won't do it unless they are able to reduce the cost of extending these loans to make it actually a viable option. Because again, with rates at 17%, if you factor in the cost of making these credit decisions, you're looking at credit priced at 25, 30%. And that is not something that is at all a robust financial decision for anyone. So going back again to decision making and saying, let's align our policies with the outcomes we want to achieve. It doesn't matter what we think is the right thing. It doesn't matter how many seminars we have and how much we can rally the small businesses and traders to say it is your national obligation to do this and be documented. They're not going to do it unless either there's a penalty to remaining undocumented or there is a clear benefit to them on documenting. So I'll pause there and we can move.
Thank you, Aisha. Lots of things to think about in terms of specific ways forward. I'm going to change the schedule a bit. I had another round of questions, but Musharraf's intervention right at the beginning reminded me of something. So from our perspective, the point of this report is to get people in Pakistan to talk to each other about some of these issues, to build a dialogue. We may not have some of it right, for one thing. There may be other ways of addressing some of these issues, but starting that conversation so that change can happen is what we're after. So rather than me asking more questions, I'm going to open it up, and then if I have time, we'll come back to my questions. Can I ask, Zishan, I've lost track of time, so tell me when, let me signal to me when we're done. And also an announcement that people who are watching online can ask questions which will be fielded by our live bloggers, Omar Siddiqui, who is a senior researcher at TIDE, and Adnan Guman, our senior economist here at the World Bank. So if you send in your questions, I guess they'll find a way to get it to me, or they'll find a way to also put that into the discussion. But in the meantime, those of you who are here, you get to ask your questions without having to do it virtually. So please.
No.
Congratulate the World Bank team on this phenomenal report. I have read the report and also there's a chapter that says working trade policy work. So a few months back, I was part of the team with the AID Associates in Development of the UN Enterprise Activity. And I happened to interview beneficiary SMEs. So I came across this SME, which was a women-led business. They were selling cheese, all sorts of cheese. So the major obstacle during their progress, which they mentioned, was the financing. So what they said that since they're an SME and they were processing cheese, so the relevant machinery which was needed to process cheese was actually had to be imported. So which was very expensive. Under the USAID's activity, the idea was that they're going to reimburse it later on. The initial investment has to be made by the SME themselves. So they applied for this import exemption scheme, and they realized that they weren't eligible for that. After that, the second option was that they wanted to collect the money for that, and they used all the resources, be it family, friends, but not the banks. Banks were not giving them the finances. And they well-established firms are going to be the major beneficiaries of these export subsidies or these exemptions through lobbying or any other process. So if the trade policy is not going to work for the smaller firms, it's unfortunately not a development policy. So my question from the esteemed panelists or maybe the other experts in the room, what are those concrete steps that are going to make these trade policies work for the smaller firms, and how these firms can grow, and how the productive resources can be diverted towards the small firms such that they grow in the long run? Thank you very much.
So Aisha, I'll give you the first crack at that, but let's take a couple more questions and then we'll come back. Yeah.
And I've served in Pakistan and several parts of the world. Some of the panel members, let me congratulate Najy, you and your team, and Gonzalo and others for really some executive summary. That's what I read in the past. I'm sure the report is great too. I wanted to add a comment and also a question to the panel on some of the points you were making about the reference to Bangladesh. There was also several references made to education and hospitality sector. I wanted to take us back to Bangladesh. I had the privilege of serving in Bangladesh for 3 years, just as Sheikh Hasina was coming in, and she's still the Prime Minister 3 years later. 3 points. So I wanted to this is perfect, put a few points on the table for the panel and for the report writers as well, because one point I think is missed in the report and your comments as well. Bangladesh emerged, what I saw personally as well, by single-handedly across the political divide, pursuing certain reforms and policies which were not associated with a political government. And I want to give an example in that. 20 years ago, I was working on Pakistan on human development sectors. I hadn't moved out of the country yet. And we started the World Bank initiative with the then political government of Punjab province, an education reform program. We borrowed a lot from Bangladesh in terms of the female secondary school stipend program as well. 20 years later, if you look at the education outcomes in Punjab province, it's nowhere where it should have been had the reforms been pursued across the political divide. What I saw in Bangladesh was it didn't matter if it was General Ziaur Rahman, Khalida Zia, or Sheikh Hasina. They decided they would invest in girls' education. They did that. And what happened in the 90s when the private sector opened up, there were these thousands of young girls ready to enter the garment industry. Today, 80% of the garment industry is females. So the point really here is that the key issue of policy continuity of across the political divide or regime change, I have seen missing in Pakistan. And I really feel that the political economy of reforms, that dimension, and Bangladesh, by the way, is right now almost a single-party country. There is just one government, one party there. But notwithstanding that, look where their reserves are, under 30%. On the export side, bringing in the private sector and having a liberal export-oriented policy, again, regardless of political changes, and believe me, Bangladesh also has really across the board a similar kind of governance issues that Pakistan and many other countries have. Notwithstanding, they have moved forward, and that's the question I want to put to the panel. The political continuity of policy, not of politicians, but policy, and lack of association of reforms with an individual is probably what I have felt really a game changer for countries such as Bangladesh. So where do you see that kind of situation emerging in this country? Thank you.
Thank you.
Aklas, I'll point this one to you first, but any of the panelists can come in on any of the questions.
Sure.
We'll take one more and then we'll come back to the panel. See a hand up here.
Thank you. My name is Manzoor Ahmed, and my background is international trade. First, I'd really like to appreciate the World Bank's effort, and especially Gonzalo. He moves out of his comfort zone and publishes op-eds and everything. Just tries to change things. But in Pakistan, our academia, our economists, etc., are not at all convinced that they think that we are a very, very open economy, and we need more import substitution. I mean, Dr. Aklas just referred to disconnect between politicians or maybe whatever the way, slightly pushing the blame on politicians. But I think that our economists, who should be, because the only thing they always quote is sometimes Professor Hajun or Donny Roderick are 2 or 3 in the world, and they always point out that we need to be more protected and not open up. Now, the point I was, yes, the other point is that every few years we have to go to IMF, and we're always in a mess. And whenever they come, one of the first conditions they have is your trade tax to GDP ratio. It should be 50% more. And what the government does is that they think the easiest way to do that is to raise more taxes on international trade. So, another regulatory duty, somebody was saying about cheese, but they just have a big category of luxury goods. Everything is a luxury good. Paper is a luxury good. Glass is everything is a luxury good. So they keep putting more and more duties, with the result that our duties from the port collection is 50%, and the world average may not be 5%. And I wanted to know how especially Dr. Aklas, because they're, from the academia, because I don't see any of our academics being convinced that we need to open up and give up on those import substitution, etc., as other countries have done almost 20 years ago or something.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'd also be curious in hearing from Musaddak on how you see this question of continued increases in taxes because you're the profitable sector. But why don't we start with you, Aisha?
Sure.
And you can address any of them.
Well, I'll address the SME one. We have one more.
We can come back if you want. It is.
As you like.
Okay, so we'll come back. Let's have some set of answers and then we come back.
I'll just be brief in this one. So I think your point around the larger corporates benefiting from legislation is one that's probably true the world over. Generally, the stronger your lobbying is, the more you benefit. And in Pakistan's case, look, in 75 years, with a few notable exceptions, one of which is sitting right next to me as well, we haven't created any global successes or any. A lot of our corporates are unfortunately rent-seeking, and there is a push on that government legislation side. Going back to how can SMEs benefit from this? If an SME is structured effectively, if an SME has clear accounts and financials, I think there are many options for raising credit there. It may not be commercial banks. Commercial banks end up being massively risk-averse, and as I said, they end up spilling over into government treasuries. And until we figure out how to manage that, if the government stops borrowing from banks, maybe you'll have less of that, maybe you can tax it. There are other ways of doing it, but there are plenty of other spaces where a well-structured, transparent SME that has a product that has a demand, and you mentioned that the cheese was so good that the end buyers were actually willing to support it. That's another source of credit. So SMEs need to think more creatively in the space where credit is going to remain increasingly challenging to access. Forget the SME sector. For anyone, even if you're looking at the corporates, the cost of credit right now is prohibitively high. So my tip there would be, look around, there are lots of spaces available. Unfortunately, legislation is always going to be skewed towards interest groups, and there will be ways in which the larger corporates will move that. That's true the world over. That doesn't stop SMEs from growing in many other countries, and I don't think it should be as much of a hold-up here, especially for the exceptional ones that you're talking about.
Thank you, Aisha.
Musada? Okay. I would start with, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think these are all problems which are interrelated. You can't just address one issue and everything will be okay. Talking about what we have been saying so far, I think we all understand there is elite capture in this country which has, you see, grown over the period of years, and a few percentage of the, and it's not just the I agree with Dr. Sir, but I think the democracy and the political side of the thing can only, it's not just the people who are elected, it's the whole system, whether it's the civil and military bureaucracy, whether it's the, I can say that, I think, judiciary, whether it's the business people, everybody is, you see, the top is involved in all this, this real estate capture and the policy capture. It's the vested interests, the protections on the agriculture side, on certain industrial groups. I think it's there, and it's going to, there are people on every side who are benefiting. So no matter which party comes into power, whether you follow the constitution or not follow the constitution, unless we realize that it's probably we are at the end. We have to open up for the people of this country, and the elite capture has to end. I think this is not going to change. I personally have a lot of experience in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka. So we have plants there, and out of all the three countries, I think obviously our more than 90% investment is in Pakistan, but Sri Lanka is the best from every respect. Bangladesh, I think they have done a lot of things where I think it was pointed out they have not changed the policy. In Pakistan, the policy, I was associated with the development of the textile policy in the previous government, and I was telling all the people in the government that it's not worth the paper it's written on, unless it is, you see, provided some statutory protection or the regimes which will come after you would, you see, even the same government doesn't follow their own policy. So it's not worth the paper it's written on. So there's no long-term policy. And if at all there is something, it is protecting the elite of that. Now I think in the report it has been mentioned that Pakistan has a very low FDI. And if at all the FDI has come, it is all market seeking. There's no efficiency seeking FDI come in. I don't see, maybe one or two. Everything is market seeking, whether it's automobiles, whether it's FMCGs, it's all market seeking. We are 220 million people, and that's also welcome. But why we have not been able to? Because it's not, we are not competitive. We can say all that we have opened up for China, and they'll never come for an export market because we are not competitive. And why we are not competitive? The energy is imported, and the energy is, you see, it's all SOEs. Nobody talks about getting rid of the SOEs. There are some SOEs, and then there are some quasi-SOEs of the foundations. We never talk about the trillion rupees of losses of the SOEs. And even the profit-making SOEs, if you privatize them, including some of the banks, their profits and their taxation, they'll paying be much higher. So there are so many interventions which are very easily possible. We talked about, Dr. talked about capitalism and what is the, I think the capitalism, if you see in the world, the theory not, but the practice of capitalism has failed, and that is why you see we have seen so much rise of, I would say, extremism, because the fight between haves and have-nots. Because capitalism as a theory was not bad, but the way it was practiced, it only protected the interest of the shareholders. And now that the world is realizing that it has to look after the stakeholders. So the way you practice a system, it really matters a lot. So in Pakistan, I think it's not one or the other area. We have to revamp the whole thing, and we have to understand that the party is over. We cannot, whatever, whether IMF happens or doesn't happen, I think we have to do the correction. And as I think it's the will. We can do it because it's the digital age. If we can, and trust me, we had the best COVID vaccination program in the world. It was so well. It's just because of Nadra we could do it. We can, you see, tax the consumption. We know how people are earning. Nobody can hide it. It's not. Nobody wants to do it. There's no will. There's no political consensus on it. So we need that consensus. We have to move forward. We have to get rid of all these things. And I think our youth, this youth bulge is the. I read a report. I think it was a World Bank report, probably in Bloomberg, that the next 2 decades, South Asia will have a huge demographic dividend. And we are losing out on that because the other countries are taking advantage of their youth. We have not trained and skilled our youth to the level, as also Dr. Saab pointed out. And I think we are spending a lot of money on education. 95% of the people in Pakistan have access to primary education. But as Dr. Saab said, the quality of education is not there. So I will stop there. We can continue and maybe.
Thank you very much.
Right. So, 2 questions. First, I'll try to answer the question directed at me by Tehseen Sayyed Saiba about Bangladesh. I think that's a very important and a relevant point, and I'd just like to say that I completely agree with you when you talk about policy continuity. I'm actually not really referring to policy continuity. I think it's very important. I'm talking about, when I refer to distortions in the political market, I'm referring to the type of policies that are coming out. The kind of objectives these policies have. So in the case of Pakistan, for instance, we spend about 3% of our GDP on education in a country where people exercised a lot of influence on those who make policies. This number would be much higher because we have many children who are out of school, number one, and the quality of education that is being given to them in public schools does not really make them competitive enough to get the good jobs. So we are basically in agreement. So I completely agree that policy continuity is important. And now to turn to the question that Dr. Manzoor Saab asked me. Dr. Saab, your point is valid. I think you might be thinking that I am trying to make a market versus state argument. I'm not. I completely agree with what the report has said about removing distortions. I agree about bringing about openness, decreasing import tariffs, and so that we can force our manufacturers to get rid of this inward orientation. I completely agree. My argument is a market and state argument. What I'm essentially saying is that in order to remove the distortions that Gonzalo and the World Bank team have talked about, we have to first look at the distortions in the political market, because those who have monopolized the political market are making policies which are bringing about distortions in the economic market because these policies are in their interest. So I'm connecting two different types of markets, and I'm not operating in a world without capitalism. I'm very much operating in a world with capitalism, but I'm making a case that there has to be a separation between the political and the economic sphere, just like Sweden managed 1921 onwards. So that's my submission.
Thank you. We're already running over time, but I'm going to take one more question. Yes.
Thank you very much. So my name is Shabir Chawla, and I am former president of Faisalabad Chamber. And my question to the panel is this: that should the export should be our priority, especially the textile export, when we are doing this export on the cost of imported raw materials? All the chemicals are imported, all the yarn and cotton is imported, fuel is on imported fuel, imported oil, and then we just add our little workforce and then we export it. Should we doing this? Or we should focus on the import substitution. When we have exportable surplus, then we can do. Or we can do some specialized exports like Musaddiq Saab. They are doing wonderful things. But our other sector in textile, they are still doing the same old-fashioned things which are not actually should be for our country. My question.
I'm afraid
last question.
Very quickly.
Yes, last question. You said that political forces are doing some bad things to our economy. Actually, the most potential business in Pakistan nowadays is politics and also the government service. Because people, some mafias, some families who want to take something out of this economy, they sponsor their some maybe nephew or brother or somebody, some group of businessmen. They sponsor somebody and make him politician, and then they get their benefits out of it by sponsoring him at the time of he's coming to politics. So yes, we have to see the distortions in the political system first, then we can maybe correct the things. And
no, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to ask you just speak briefly on this question of, it's a very important question on export value added, and Akash, you have the question on again on politics.
Thank you for your question. I think primarily importing and adding value and re-exporting is not a problem. That's what Bangladesh is doing. That's what Vietnam is doing. Vietnam is, I think, 100% of their GDP is imported, and then 105% exported. So it's a 5% value addition, which makes a lot of difference. The thing is that we have not moved up the value chain. Textile, actually, I don't talk about textile. We have not gone into the garments and apparel sectors. We have been exporting yarn and fabric, which is raw materials. But we have to graduate up there. Every developed country, whether it's South Korea, whether it's Japan, whether it's China, whether it's Vietnam, they have all graduated first from textiles, and then they have, because it's a big employer. Then you move up, but we have to encourage other industries. There should be no distortions in encouragement. But at the same time, we have to, encourage the services exports. This youth bulge can be utilized for freelancing. We can bring in billions of dollars of freelancing dollars. So that has to come in. Import substitution is not going to help us. Let me tell you. It might be needed somewhere. For example, the lady there mentioned about cheese. So we have a joint venture of cheese, and we have import substituted all the cheese which is coming for the top chains from Turkey. We are now producing it, and the top chains are buying from us, the top quality cheese. And we are exporting butter. So the things are possible where there is local ingredients are available. You can always do that. But just going blindly about import substitution, I don't think that's going to help. We have to work on exports, on a wide variety of exports and the services exports.
Thank you very much. Akash, very quickly on the politics.
Sure, I'll just do this thing. Okay, so I'll just say that I use slightly more charitable language than what was attributed to me, but your point is well taken, and you largely seem to agree with the thesis that I am presenting here. And so, just to state it very briefly, I think we need all the reforms that this report has talked about, but in addition to that, I'm also putting on the table reforms in the political market, and this idea to conceive of democracy as a market is a very old one. I mean, those of you who know about Anthony Downs, 1956, people have been talking about this for a very long time, but I think the time has probably come that for international institutions like the one that you belong to seriously look at the kind of things that are holding countries like Pakistan back. Are we going to use the same strategies that we have been using for all these years, or are we going to innovate in terms of when it comes to offering new types of reforms? It's going to be a minefield, but I think now's the time to start thinking about it.
Lady, I saw a lot of hands back raised, but we're not going to have time to do them. But there is another panel where you'll have more opportunities to ask questions. I want to thank all three of you. It's been a really fascinating conversation, and one that I hope very much that we can continue. Thank you, and thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much to the panelists for the specifics of this and Aisha, but especially Matthew for that terrific moderation of that session and for also fielding questions from the audience. I just want to very quickly offer up a clarification, and that being that Tabadla merits no credit for the content or the comprehensiveness of the country economic memorandum. That credit goes entirely to Gonzalo and Zara and other colleagues over at the World Bank who've spent a tremendous amount of time, energy, effort, and resources in trying to solve this problem, this long-standing systemic problem. And also my thanks to Umar Siddiqui, senior researcher at PIDE, as well as Adnan Guman, a senior economist at the World Bank, who have been live blogging throughout the course of this event. We're going to take a quick coffee break. Coffee is served in the back. We're about 10 to 15 minutes behind, so if I could ask everyone to be back in their seats by about 11:30, and we will kick off the second panel. Thank you very much. Panel, there's a very quick video that we wanted to play for you. It's called Power to Her, and it was an innovation challenge that was hosted by the World Bank in collaboration with the NIC, the National Incubation Center. 300 entries were received from all over Pakistan, and the winning entry was from Khawateen Rozgar, the founder of which, Misbah Faiz, we're going to hear from her in a short video in just a moment.
I am Misbah Faiz and I belong to Peshawar. I'm an electrical engineer and currently doing my PhD in business administration. I have been doing jobs for 5 years and have been involved with different companies and organizations. During my involvement and my interaction with the companies and industrialists, I realized that they were looking for suitable female human resource for their companies and organizations, but unfortunately, they were not able to find suitable female human resource for themselves. On the other hand, I realized that there were a lot of females around me who were looking for jobs and suitable jobs that were relevant to them, but unfortunately, they were not able to find. One day when I was on job, a security guard approached me and he asked for a job for his daughter. It actually opened my eyes that a lot of families do allow their daughters and their sisters to work, but unfortunately, they did not have ease of access to the suitable jobs and good jobs that they were looking for. Therefore, in 2018, I started my very own startup, Khawateen Rozgar Services, a platform that links female human resource with the employers. We started off with headhunting. However, slowly and gradually we realized that in today's technological era, it is really necessary that we digitize our all processes. So we got a grant from USAID, and from that grant, we decided to scale up and digitize and automate our processes. Recently, we participated in a competition organized by World Bank and National Incubation Center Pakistan, and we were the winners of Power to Her competition. Fortunately, we won the grant and we were the first prize winners. With the help of this grant, we are now focusing more on scaling up the startup. Till date, Khawateen Rozgar Services has over 25,000 females that are registered with us from all over Pakistan, majority of them belonging to the province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and currently we have placed over 700 females across Pakistan. So my message to all Pakistani women is dream, search, apply, and get hired.
And to kick that off, I'd like to invite Mr. Najy Benhassine, the country director for the World Bank in Pakistan. Najy has served as the Equitable Growth, Finance and Institutions Regional Director for the Middle East and the North Africa region, following his time as the Director for the Finance, Competitiveness and Innovation Global Practice. Najy has had 22 years at the World Bank, starting all the way back in 2001. Before that, served at McKinsey, as well as the Swiss Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Geneva. Very long, lengthy resume. I don't want to get into all of it, because if I did, then I think the time for the panel would be up. Along with Najy, we have several other individuals joining this panel, including Dr. Alia Khan, who is the former Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences at Qaeda University, and is associated in an advisory capacity as a labor and gender economist with various committees of the Planning Commission of Pakistan and the PBS, the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, in addition to international organizations such as ILO, UNDP, the World Bank itself, GIZ, as well as Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. Our second panel is Dr. Farah Said. Dr. Said, do we have? Sorry? Right, Dr. Farah Said is actually online. She uses field and lab experiments to study the dynamics of poverty and gender in lower middle income countries. Her research investigates how men and women make decisions in the household and factors that influence labor force participation, learning outcomes, and demand for low-cost energy and microfinance products among low-income households. So I think her perspective, given that this session focuses on FLFP, female labor force participation, will be crucial. We also have Dr. Ali Hasnain. Dr. Ali Hasnain received his PhD from George Mason University and has conducted postdoctoral research at Oxford and Princeton universities as a Global Leaders Fellow. His research focuses primarily on how public service delivery can be improved through reform initiatives, particularly through technological progress and improvements in the media. And last, but certainly not the least, Sheikh Muhammad Iqbal Sahib. Sheikh Muhammad Iqbal Sahib is a leading business executive with over 30 years of industry experience with leading local business houses and multinationals working across Pakistan. He has held executive and consulting roles across the textile, food, IPPs, and renewable energy sectors. The panel that we are going to host this afternoon, the second and the final one, is titled Unleashing, I'm sorry, if I may ask for Unleashing the Talent of Pakistani Women, and it primarily focuses on the distribution of talent across the various sectors in Pakistan. I believe one of the numbers that was personally shocking to me was that the participation of female labor in the manufacturing industry in Pakistan, for example, lies at just 4%. This session will also be live blogged by two individuals, the first of which is Veronica Gutierrez, an economist at the World Bank, and one of the co-authors of the chapter on FLFP. She joins us all the way from Rome, and will be live blogging the entire way through. And the second individual sitting right there, Zahra Aslam, another economist at the World Bank, who is one of the authors of this report, and very much takes the credit for the reason that we are all gathered in this room today. So with that, I'd like to remind our viewers that because this is all live on social media, you can ask questions that will be fielded by our live bloggers. And with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Benhassine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Panel, but before going into the panel discussion, I'd like to start by one thing, because somebody at the start of the day mentioned that there are brilliant economists in Pakistan who have done, contribute to that work. But I would like, this report is really interesting to read. It has original analysis and findings, so I really encourage you to read all of it. Some parts are technical, but it's very, very easy to read, so really encourage you. And before I move to the panel, because it's also about female labor force participation, I'd like to ask for a round of applause to the two lead co-authors of this report, a Pakistani female economist, Zahra Aslam, who co-wrote it with a very close, let me call him a Pakistani economist, Gonzalo. He's so embedded and following so closely the Pakistani economy, so he deserves a passport. All right, so, and there's a much broader team that contributed to it, and I wanted to acknowledge them and thank them here because it's a major contribution. And this is just the start of a conversation. The team's gonna visit universities, going to provinces, going on a tour to have this conversation follow through. So in the first panel, we've heard about resource allocation, the allocative problems. Mentioned why is there so much investment going into non-tradable real estate versus tradables and exports? Why doesn't talent and capital move from low productive firms to high productive firms? And a big part of the misallocation of talent in Pakistan, as you have heard in Gonzalo's introduction presentation, is about women labor force participation. So I won't go into repeat the detailed numbers and analysis that Gonzalo presented, but still, female labor force participation in Pakistan is about 21, 22%. That's among the lowest in the world. I have to say it's South Asia region in general, possibly with the exception of Bangladesh with manufacturing growth, is an outlier in the world, but Pakistan is definitely an outlier. It's low, and it has stayed low for so long. So that's one figure I'd like you to remember, about 20, 22% female labor force participation. So the second point that was interesting in the report is not only this U-shaped that he described, meaning at very low level of income and very low level of education, female participation is higher. Yes, a lot of it is driven by agricultural employment, but not only. Then it goes down significantly and goes up a little bit for higher income and highly educated. And that's a puzzle. And the report shows that in districts that have more connectivity, be it easier connectivity, be it transport or access to internet, this U-curve is a bit flatter. That tells something about how much connectivity could help. But the goal of this panel, and I'll stop here and get the discussion started, is to understand first this puzzle, the status quo, the situation, but more importantly, this is not an area where we have easy solutions. It's an area where things need to be tried. So hearing from you, your own experience, your own research, on ideas of what Pakistan could do, what kind of policies, what kind of interventions, what kind of experimentations could be tried to get a dent at this stubbornly low rate would be very welcome. So I'll start, maybe Dr. Ali, I would start with you directly with a question. So despite some improvements over the past decades, FLFP, the female labor force participation, is desperately low and flat over the years. In your opinion, what are the three biggest challenges to increasing this rate? Over to you.
Thank you very much.
I think it is, yes.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Varela and the World Bank for convening this very important launch at a time when Pakistan is in the midst of serious economic issues, and this actually gives hope that some of the issues can be addressed through looking at some of the structural constraints that have been highlighted in the report. The chapter on female labor force participation is actually very, very pertinent in tying up the issue of low FLFPR in Pakistan to the previous more macro-based chapters. And I'm glad to see that it has been placed where it is. I would also refer the audience for a better understanding to look at the South Asia Economic Focus Spring 2022 World Bank publication which raised the issue of social and gender norms, which also runs through this chapter again, chapter 6, I think it is, on FLFP. Now, as far as the challenges are concerned, I think we haven't really ever seriously tried to address the issue of low FLFP in Pakistan. And why do I say that? Because what have we done in the past? There used to be a Ministry of Women Development. There now, because the issue is devolved, we have departments of women development, and basically the most that they did was to implement projects for economic empowerment of women, and that too without really linking it to any macro framework that was
being implemented in the country. So there was always this gap that the FLFP issue was considered to be not a mainstream issue, but rather a women's issue. And I think that has been the major problem. Also, we do collect a lot of gender disaggregated data. And in fact, I'm going to point out to some very stark figures which are not used for policy discourse or for policy development also. And I was, asked to identify 3 challenges. Now, the first challenge that I would like to point out is that looking at the latest labor force survey, which is, by the way, on a district level, so it has a very, very rich collection of data, gender segregated data for researchers, which has yet to be mined, I think. The employment status, if you just look at the employment status, what is the employment status of the women who are employed in Pakistan? 56% of them are what are called contributing family workers or unpaid family workers, and by comparison, it's only 11% for men. So there is one statistic which is really all revealing, because when we talk of mainstreaming women into the labor force, we are talking of, shifting a huge lot of women from the contributing family worker employment status to being self-employed, which we have heard since the morning that there are examples of, very successful entrepreneurial women, or employees, because, the manufacturing, the women who work in the manufacturing and service sector also, and mostly in the formal sector, they are categorized as employees. I know I'm taking too much time, so let me go on to the second challenge. The second challenge is that of the the school to work transition. And since we are talking of educated women who are not in the labor force, because remember, what does an FLFPR of 21.4%, which is the latest, it has gone down after COVID from 22. What does it mean? It means 80% of the working age population of women in Pakistan is out of the labor force. So it's not clear that the ones who are out of the labor force are not, they don't have the human capital to be in the labor force. It's just that they are there because of some norms or because of some other issues relating to the malfunctioning of the labor market. What are we doing in our educational institutions to mentor this generation of young women to transition from educational institutions to the labor force? And it's a long debate, counseling is obviously one of them, career counseling, but there are other, instruments in the toolkit, as I say. And the third is conducive environment at work. When we talk of a harassment-free, conducive environment at work, we need to see that in action before many of those 80% of females who are not stepping out into the labor force make the jump and join the labor force. So I'll stop here, and I hope I've, created a pathway for the discussion to continue forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Ali. And let me remind you one result, another result of this report. If female labor force participation would increase to just where comparator countries similar to Pakistan stand, GDP could increase to 23% higher than what it is today. Just that. So let's go to Farah Saeed, and let me just check that she can hear us well. Doctor, can you hear us? Can you come in just to make sure sound is working, then I'll ask my question. Yes, we hear you very well. So thanks for joining, Doctor. So in your very interesting research, you look at where decisions are made, which means decision making at the household level and decisions of women or men to decide to participate to labor market and to start to work. How do household dynamics in your research, in your work or other work, show impacts a decision for women to participate in the labor market? And what can be done to help women work and make a decision to join the labor market? Over to you, Dr. Farah.
Something you see consistently is when they ask about decision making, more than roughly around 75% of the women across these different surveys say, if we don't work, it's mostly because we don't have permission from a household member to work. And as I said, this is across public surveys, but also some surveys that we've done with microfinance sample, where arguably women have borrowed money to set up a business. So they have the intention to work, but a lot of them are saying, well, we work because our family members tell us it's okay for us to set up a business. In fact, in one of the experiments in Lahore, this is a very rigorous experiment conducted by researchers at SERP. They have a job search and matching platform, and they've actually seen that if you encourage women to talk to their families, for example, and so what we see is that while women have decision-making power in some spheres, some like purchasing groceries or small items for the household or making some decisions about their children, they have less say when it comes to making decisions about investment, even if it's in their own business at home, or their own education or their labor market decisions. And so if you look at evidence from India, Ghana, Sri Lanka, something context similar to Pakistan, there we see that a lack of decision-making power translates into even access to finance, funds being actually just misappropriated, taken away by others in the family. In particular, if a female entrepreneur borrows and there's another male member in the family who already has a business in the household, those funds actually just go to his business versus her own business. So there's some kind of investment happening, but it's not in female labor force in that sense. In our own particular research in Pakistan, we do this with microfinance clients as well. We find that women tend to hide the money they've received. So this could be any resources, not particularly loans, but anything they have on their own, they like to hide it just so that they have more decision-making power over it. And so certain decisions like investing in a business, which is not very easy to hide, they tend to make less of. So very visible investments, they're not very interested in. If you add this to the social norm that Dr. Alia was also talking about on the unpaid work that women do, so the housework in the household among males and females is very distinct, it's divided, and women have, globally speaking, what is called time poverty. That's they don't have time to dedicate to productive income-generating activities. So for example, in the time use survey in Pakistan, which is conducted back in 2007, we see that men spend about half an hour on average per day on housework, but women spend up to 5 hours, 4 to 5 hours on average. And this is regardless of employment status. So women who work are working just as much in the house as women who don't work, don't have like work outside the home. And so that basically means in our qualitative survey with women, women have complained that, look, when we work, we have to do a double shift. So we go to work, we work there, we come back, and we do this again at home. So if our household circumstances allow, we would rather just have some reduction in the amount of work that we have to do. So that could explain some of the U curve that we also see. So in the microfinance sample, the more successful women are those who have at least adult children who can take care of the younger siblings and free up the time for the mother to invest in the business. So, and then another small note that, again, borrowing from what Dr. Alia was saying, when she talked about having a conducive environment, that's something that goes into the decision-making of the household itself, about whether it's an appropriate job for the woman, whether the mobility constraints are something that she can navigate easily, or does that mean that a brother or a husband or a father has to go and pick and drop her from work? That puts additional constraints. So within these, you can imagine that if you have some kind of transport system, you have childcare at work, if you have information where you provide women about what kind of work that they have to do, what is the gender balance, do they work with a female supervisor, all of that could actually encourage more and more women to step out and also encourage their households to support this kind of work. So again, drawing from examples in Pakistan, and in specific, a training program actually conducted by the PSDF, they actually find that there's an invisible barrier that women face, which comes, for them, it came at the village level boundary. So regardless of how much you were paying women to actually go and get training, they were unwilling to cross that boundary because that meant something about crossing a social barrier. They don't feel safe outside of the household socially. So it doesn't have to do with physical safety, it's just socially inappropriate to do so. So you could pay them a lot, they would not be willing to do that, but if you group them and go, then that's something that they might be encouraged to do. So I know I'm taking up a bit of time. I can come back to this. So there's actually a lot of research which tells us what could work, and so I can go on this for another 10 minutes. But just to also go back to what you were saying in the middle about the productivity and talent misallocation, it's not just a matter of just increasing female labor force participation. So I find a lot of people actually just say, oh, let's just encourage more and more women to set up businesses at home, which is good. They may be earning something, but that's not the most efficient use of their time. So there's some evidence from work that Oriana Bendiera and Nawaz Sharaf and others have done with a microfinance, well, sorry, not a microfinance, but an M&E firm with about 100,000 employees in 101 countries, one of which country is actually Pakistan as well. And they find that if they were able to actually hire women, because talented women, the productivity in Pakistan, in particular, of that one company would have increased by 90%. So it may be higher than the 23 to 30% increase in GDP if we kind of allocate this talent more efficiently. So I'll stop here, and I hope that answered your question. But if there's anything else that you would like for me to explain, I can talk more.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarah. Never know whether my microphone works or not. It does? Okay. Thank you very much. That was fascinating research and findings. Interestingly, that cut across, because not only, as I understand, surveys in Pakistan, but in other countries, including South Asia, where in South India, for example, where you did a similar survey and the rates are about the same. So they cut across borders, they cut across different lines, religions. So it's actually fascinating. The other point that was very interesting, and I take your point on that the 23%, it doesn't account for the allocative efficiency point that you made, probably, but Gonzalo would be better placed to answer that. And the other point so you pointed strongly to social norms and pressures inside the family, something very difficult to change, but you also mentioned this point that when there's a younger sibling who can take care of some of the work at home, the chances of being able to work outside are higher, and that's very interesting, and we'll come back to it in the second part. Let me turn to Mr. Sheikh Mohammed Iqbal and move a bit to the, as economists call it, the demand side, so how much firms want to employ women. So how do employers, in your view, view decisions around hiring women? What factors have led to lower hiring of women by some firms? Is there a skills gap? Is there a perception or reality that there are additional costs of hiring women. And I want to give a little bit of personal context to my question. Not long ago, I was in Sialkot and visited two firms that were a few hundred meters apart. One employed 30% women, with all what goes with it, buses that took women from their neighborhood home to the entrance, and bathrooms for women, etc., childcare. And the other had literally zero, not a single woman. So I was asking myself that even if the CEO or the management of that second firm wanted to hire women, a first woman, that's a big decision when you're starting from 100% men on the factory floors. So just as a way of context of these extremes, but we see more of the latter than the former, I'd like to hear what drives this decision to hire or not hire women.
Is it working? Yeah.
Europe or Bangladesh, society literally trumps everything. That's very important. The second thing, when we talk of employers, so they are not one monolith. That even within one company which have 4 different locations, its head office, there will be a totally different gender mix. In their head offices, you go, you see women in all kinds of dresses. Nobody notices because it has been accepted. But if you go to their factories, depending upon where they are located and what they are producing, you will find 5 different mosaics in 5 different locations. So when we talk of employers, we have to keep that thing in mind. And of course, when we say, I'll be talking from the textiles point of view, but we have to say whether we are talking about agriculture sector, whether we're talking about services sector, whether we're talking about mining sector, for example, no women. So many of our members, or the people that I kind of talk to, in a way, they're gender blind. Many of them are. Many of them are at a point that they know that this needs to be done, but they have this vision about themselves or about their organizations that maybe they are not ready, maybe they are not there yet. It's a barrier, it's a conception. But as you go from the big corporates all the way to SME, the situation totally is different. Some of those SMEs, even men have a difficult time working there because of the condition, everything, let alone women. That's an important thing. In terms of employability of women, this is something weird that I'm going to say. Some of the employers, they have this thing that if we hire women, they are more agreeable, they won't unionize, and many of them can hire the same person equally qualified in case a woman may be at a lower price, maybe at a lower cost. So in many cases, women employees are preferred. This is important. But there are costs associated with women also. Again, this could be different from within one company, depending on their location, the kind of cadres that we're talking about, is it shop floor, is it managerial position? There are costs associated with that. I'll come to that cost because it's an important point. They need safe space. Women need safe space in an environment. They need, in some cases, childcare support services also. Transportation is a big problem. So when we look at this thing, so the thing one notices is that so many things that society is supposed, the government is supposed to have done this, it is being passed on to the private sector. So some of these are social costs which are being privatized. So how does an employer decide to hire more women? First of all, they're simply better employees. They are simply better. They're equally qualified, they will hire them. You go downstairs to shop floor, now there are costs. You have to, there are 2,000 women working there, you have to provide transport for them. But they're providing transport for men also, because sometimes the local pool is exhausted, they have to drive them, bring them in from 14 kilometers or 50 kilometers. So, but the most important cost, which in the employer's mind is high turnover. Again, that goes back to society, that goes back how our society is kind of arranged. If I hire somebody, I invest, she's up to the mark, up to speed, 6 months, 7 months, It's happening to me also by one of my best kind of associate. She just got married, and her husband lives in New York, so she's going to go. So there are some costs which are essentially social costs, which the society or the government is supposed to do. And one more important thing is, how do you hire more women? So there are two sides of it, the demand side and the supply side. You cannot have quotas. Okay, you have somebody has to have 20% female population, no. The best way to do is you simply educate more women, you simply train them more. So there is supply pressure, you apply for 50 jobs, there are 500 applicants, 300 of them are women, they are equally competent, they will kind of get in. The other is demand side. It has been happening. The mindset you cannot change by a diktat. The only diktat that works is the market diktat. If my buyer tells me that, okay, there's this gap because my customers, my constituents are telling me that you're buying from somebody who has this kind of a configuration, do more, they will do more. The government, you just cannot legislate it. That's the way. So supply side is you just train more people, you just educate more girls so they are available, they are there, the job openings are there, you will have to talk to them, and then of course the demand side. And then of course the cost. There are costs, but cost of $500,000 to a company which is a $100 billion company, they can afford to spend that money in terms of providing infrastructure, separate bathrooms, blah, blah, blah. And practically all of the major companies have it. This is not an issue anymore. They are there. Many of my members, they are there. Almost all of them are there, so this is not an issue for them. But somebody who's a smaller player, who's a bit player, it simply is very difficult for him or her in that class, in that revenue class, in that product class. It's difficult. So then as an employer, my members are literally gender blind. It doesn't really matter to them. Nobody even notices that this company has 5 senior executives, 3 of them are women, senior executives, chief operating officer level. Nobody bats an eyelid. But if the same company goes 100 kilometers outside where their factory is, situation changes. How to hire more? Supply more. There are more women applying, there are more women trained, more women educated. And then if the customer demands, that's the way it is going to be. But in terms of cost of maternity leave, okay, it is a cost, but this is the law. I cannot say no to it, it's a cost, it's a cost. But social costs like transportation and of course turnover. These are the things that an employer has in mind, but in many of companies that I talk to, even this is not an issue. It is accepted that 2%, 3%, 5% turnover will be there. So I think I'll stop here, we can take it on.
Thank you very much. I'm tempted to challenge you a little bit on the supply side because education and supply, education and human capital of women has increased significantly over 20 years, but that hasn't moved and translated at all in increase. So we can do. It's a difficult question. I don't think there's easy answers, but that one I'm not totally. It would have happened over the past 20 years if it was all about education and skills, which is needed. But let me turn to Dr. Benhassine, and thank you for joining again. So. It was mentioned by Dr. Farah on financial inclusion, through the angle that some women who have access to microfinance, when they borrow, the funds go to other family members. I think she implied husbands or other male family members. What's your view on financial inclusion of women in Pakistan? It is extremely limited now. Why? And do you think it is a binding constraint? Maybe it's about skills, but maybe it's about finance. Would increased access to financial inclusion of women help solve the problem?
So I have the unenviable position of following 2 excellent women scholars who work on this area to mansplain FLFP to you. And in particular, I think the question that you asked me is something that perhaps Farah might be better positioned to speak to because she has much more work on financial inclusion than I do, and it would be unfair for me to, as I said, mansplain. It's important for women to speak and men to listen, which is something we're not great at, on this issue. And with your permission, I'd like to speak perhaps more broadly to the report first, And if, after Faraz had a go at it, if there's something I can add, I'd be happy to. I think the report does an excellent job of summarizing both the potential of a higher female labor force participation and the constraints. And in particular, I think it highlights that if you want to talk about growth, then women's participation can't be something that's a box-ticking exercise in policy making. It has to be something that's front and center, simply because we literally cannot afford to neglect it, given the size of the pot that's on the table, begging for us to engage with it. Where I thought that perhaps the report could sharpen its focus, perhaps, was in the recommendations, where I thought that there were simply too many recommendations. They were all sensible, but there were too many. And the reason I say this is that I think that the energy that we can put behind any given action is inversely proportional to the number of actions that we are proposing. The report rightly emphasizes, I think 8 of the 30 recommendations I saw in the report were around female labor force participation, but I thought there are things here that, if nothing else, we can sharpen the framing of how we're going to deal with this. So, and in passing, let me just say that I thought that the argument made about digital inclusion in particular was something that we need further evidence on, which is something that the writers have acknowledged as important, bringing more evidence to it. But I wouldn't go so far as to recommend putting digital connectivity as a primary recommendation before we have the evidence that A, that it would matter, and B, that there's something we can do about it. I think some of it might have been, some of the correlations we saw might simply be correlations. But you asked what are the binding constraints, and I think to me, 3 of the major binding constraints on female labor force participation are issues that we don't necessarily have to directly approach from a women's rights lens, and we have to integrate with larger conversations. The first of these is schooling, where we know that Pakistan lags the likes of India by something like 3 decades in terms of putting kids in school. You ask a young mother, and the time that a child is in school is the time that she gets to think and work. And so when we talk about childcare in the context of the report, you have to think about the connect to schooling. And when you have more kids that are out of school, then that clearly creates a greater childcare burden. On that, I think, as has already been mentioned, transport, especially for women or girl students, is important. From my own experience, my father runs a skills training school in a rural part of Punjab, and specifically for the girls' classes that he runs, he has to arrange for transport to go and pick the kids up. They're very diligent students when they're in the school, but the constraint is that you have to go and pick them up, and they have to be assured that the transport is safe, clearly. So within the broader agenda of schooling, I would put the thing that we can deal with specifically on this issue is perhaps better transport, as the report also highlights. Another issue that I think, and this really speaks to the broader point also made with reference to productivity and trade, is that discrimination always shrinks when you have greater contestability or competition. And so the question of why discrimination against women participation in the labor force exists is also linked to for example, is a symptom simply the same as the existence of zombie firms, as the report suggests, firms that have been making losses for 3 years. Why do those firms exist? When they're leaving money on the table by not rearranging resources, perhaps is the same reason why we're leaving money on the table by not engaging with women workers. So structural transformation work, I imagine, would also help improve women's participation. The third thing, and this is something that I have done some research on, is on policing. One of the biggest talking points I have on the economy is the need of security of life, property rights, and contract enforcement, and in particular with security of life, and in this case, harassment issues. I have a paper that I contributed to that is now being taken further by Ali Chima and Ehsan Farooqi at Ideas, by Sarah Khan at Yale and Jake Shapiro at Princeton, where the work that they're doing now is to investigate the impact of creating women's forums to give feedback to the police force on where to work. So this is in the context of a community policing effort, and our police simply is not structured to work to women's issues. And so when we arranged for women's forums, which was exclusively women spaces where they could talk about their policing needs, the results that we got from that citizenry was almost diametrically opposite to what we were getting from men. And so the neglect that you see on things like high-profile rape cases, where we are more concerned, it seems, about making sure that we are not putting those news reports in the media than we are about actually dealing with rape, is something that would feed into the capacity of the country to fix this. And finally, I think it's important for us, and this is where I think the direct work that we need to do with reference to female labor force participation is to enter into that negotiation with society, where we are actually interrogating what our identity is and does it have to be this way. And let me quote to you, and I don't want to get this wrong. Surah Maida in the Quran says, "O believers, do not forbid the good things which Allah has made lawful for you." And the fact that female labor force participation is amongst the lowest in the world in Pakistan, even relative to other Muslim countries, begs the question of why we're not opening up this conversation with Islamic scholars and with those who proselytize a certain way of life and saying, well, is this consistent with Islam? And finally, ultimately, and I think Agdas mentioned this in the previous panel, this is a political question and we have to address it. It has to be addressed by homegrown institutions, which means that there's great facilitation work that the organizations like the World Bank can do, but it's ultimately up to homegrown institutions to actually create those conversations that will get us moving forward.
Thank you very much, and I can't agree more on this last point particularly. The work you do, the experiments, it gives me a good segue for the second part of this discussion, which, if I may ask you to keep it short so that we can have an exchange with the audience as well. But I want to note one point that you mentioned, which is the out-of-school children and the additional childcare burden it represents as an important explanation. And I'd like to note that a sad number, Pakistan tops the world in terms of the number of children that are out of school. 22 million children under 15 are out of school in Pakistan. Just surpassed Nigeria recently. And that's a human capital crisis, and I think it has a relation with the ability of decisions of mothers to work or not because of the childcare burden. So, second part of the discussion, solutions, ideas, experimentation. And as much as on the first panel, the fixing the distortions, the allocative distortions in the economy is something that, we kind of know what to do. We know taxes on property and real estate need to increase. I feel strongly about this one, so I want to go on record and insist on it, and it's explained in the report, relatively to other sectors to reduce distortions. We know that there needs to be more openness. I think the evidence is very strong. In the area of female labor force participation, it's not obvious, and I sympathize with the team and the list of ideas they suggested. It's not obvious exactly what could be done and what works. So I'd like to hear a few ideas from the panel on both the demand side, so what could be done to incentivize employers to recruit, but also supply, incentivize, address social norms, all these difficult questions. Let me start with you, Dr. Hadiya Khan, on the overall government policies or what can be done to address either demand or supply. You pick.
Okay, I'm going to focus on the demand side because interestingly, when I was researching a little bit for today's panel discussion, what I came across under the topic of gender equality was how to use demand-based employment promotion policies to promote gender equality. So it's you know, and much as industrial policy is a thing of the past for many discourses, it is coming back. So if we want to change the scenario that I earlier presented, that we want the employment status of women to change from being contributing family workers, which is just an extension of their care roles within the household, even if it is productive, it is not counted as work. We have to sort out, ways and paths to mainstream women into the labor market as employees. They have to be recognized. Even the agricultural workforce is not recognized as, you know, quote unquote employees, so they do not come under any employment benefit framework that, you know, women or men would benefit from if they were counted as employees. So some movement from this huge informal economy to some measures of formality, and the world is suffering after COVID because of this huge issue of the informal economy in countries. And there are ways to tackle it. So some reforms leading to formalization of both enterprises like SMEs and workers, which would create more demand for women workers. And I think we should be convinced by now that if half of the population is women, then, you know, the social norms, whether they are lodged within the household or even, as I heard from the employer side, they are as much there at the corporate level from the employer side also. We have to sort of, shift those social norms through policy. And one way of doing that is to make macro policy more sensitive to inducting more women into the labor force. It is a macro issue, it is an economic issue, it is not simply, just a matter of women's economic rights or breaking down norms. It is a matter of Pakistan's economic survival, that we tap into the untapped talent and potential. And, the supply side issue, sir, I think we have, what are the employers, which database are the employers referring to when they say that there are not enough educated and untrained women? There are, but they do not have the opportunities to use that talent because the demand is not there. People are not willing to hire them. So, I'm sorry I get passionate when I talk about this issue, but it's been a long struggle, and I think we need to get out of it with some saving grace at the end.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And to be fair to panel members, it's not my role at all, but I will do it since I challenge Mr. Iqbal. I'll challenge you a bit, questioning why formalization would really change things, increase female. Yes, they'll get a paper in their hands, but how would it help recruit more women? I didn't get that point.
Okay, I don't mean formalization and what is considered a permanent position, because in Pakistan, formalization is also linked with non-casualization of work. Formalization means that even if you are a domestic worker, you should know what your responsibilities and what your, benefits from a job are, because in case you have a grievance, you are not paid on time.
So the quality of work.
So decent work considerations, that is what I meant. And
understood.
The reason why I was connecting it with the earlier discourse was, why don't SMEs grow to scale? It's not all about finance, and Dr. Aisha put it very succinctly. They don't want to grow because then they will have to conform to certain labor laws and certain, buyer practices, which
So on the quality of home-based work, totally agree, and we're working a lot with provinces on home-based work legislation and implementation. Dr. Farah, we spoke about demand constraint. Can we switch to ideas on how to unlock supply constraints, in particular social norms, getting into the families? That's very hard, but I'm sure you'll have ideas or suggestions to experiment. Over to you.
I do have ideas. In fact, this is one of those areas where we have a lot of evidence. It's just a lack of will to implement them, but this is not an area where we don't know what to do. So I'm going to try to summarize a lot of evidence into 5 main points. The first one, as you said, is about social norms. It's difficult to change social norms, but there is, it's an encouragement to us, but there is evidence that you could change norms even in the short run or the medium run. So there's evidence from India on sensitization at school, which has changed how boys and girls feel it's appropriate for women to work and what kind of jobs they can have. And this has been done in our city, and so they've seen this effect last for 1 or 2 years. There's evidence from Saudi Arabia that a lot of men overestimate how the society perceives that it may be socially inappropriate for their wives to work, and once they're told that they don't actually think that it's that inappropriate, they revise their own personal views, and their wives are more likely to work. From Pakistan, on work that I've done, we've showed female graduates in Lahore role model videos without giving them any other indications about how to apply to jobs, but just knowing there are other women, alumni of their colleges, who've applied to different kinds of jobs, makes them more likely to start applying. So this is evidence that we found during the pandemic, where things were very difficult. Women who saw this role model 10-minute video were 10% more likely to be working during the pandemic. So, and India, again, you have evidence on it making it safer or making it more socially appropriate for women to go to training or to go to work by just encouraging them to take a friend along, so travel with someone. So that's one aspect. You could change social norms even in the short run, and the idea is if you have enough women going into a particular field, social norms will gradually start to change as well. The second thing is, echoing Ali's point, education works, not only because it reduces the burden of housework at home, but also we've seen evidence in a different setting, for instance, from the female stipend program in Pakistan, an evaluation that I and my co-author Tarina Musaddiq did, is that once the households are encouraged to keep their children girls at school, in secondary school, just an additional year of schooling means that they delay their marriage, delays their early pregnancies, increases their empowerment levels at home, and that we couldn't actually find if that empowerment level leads to labor force outcomes as well, because we didn't have the data, but other evidence points that if the empowerment level goes up, labor force participation should also go up. The third point is make it easier to go to work and stay at work. So information about work and facilities available, again, growing from evidence from Lahore and the job market initiative that I mentioned earlier. If you tell female applicants, that there is a female supervisor at work, or you just tell them about the gender ratio, they're 25% more likely to start applying. So this is an important information. It's very easy to get this information as well. And then Dr. Ali, I think, talked about safe public spaces and transport. This could mean on a public level having well-lit stops, having frequent bus stops, adequate street lighting for them to come back safely in the evening, helplines, female officers, as Ali was saying, and then employer-driven initiatives, which includes a lot of transport initiatives as well. The fourth one would be improving control over resources. So here I'm going to be drawing again from the microfinance side. So microfinance, by and large, has not shown transformative effects for female enterprise. Male businesses have higher profits, female businesses don't. And one of the reasons why, as I mentioned before, is that sometimes these resources are appropriated away. The second one is perhaps they're not investing in the most profitable business. They're investing in the business that's suitable for them. And this could mean that they're essentially just working at home and not leaving the home, even if it means to expand the business. So in an experiment that we did with women who wanted to set up a business, and we provided them with access to finance, we did find that in the first year, 20% of that sample did set up a business, which was a huge jump from the status quo. But then 1 year later, 10% of those businesses had shut down, and 2 years later, almost all of those businesses had shut down. So you could give an initial jump from access to finance, but that's not sufficient. So what does evidence tell us? Access to money is not, it may be necessary, it's not sufficient. What you want is some control over that money as well. So providing asset financing has worked in different contexts. In India, providing money directly into the accounts of the women as opposed to accounts of where the husband also has access to that money has worked. In Pakistan, if you look at BISP, having the biometric come in, I mean, earlier it used to be ATM, and now once you have the biometric, more and more women have control over that money. You have evidence from the mobile money market now, not unfortunately from Pakistan, but this is from Kenya, where if you give money in their mobile, to women in their mobile accounts, their profits go up because that's money that they can now control and invest in their businesses. And this ties to the point that the report is also making about internet connectivity and how connected female entrepreneurs may be. So that was my, that was my last point on improving control over resources. But I hope this is good of a summary.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. I'd like to ask you something, and to everybody, every study or paper you mentioned, if you can send us and send Gonzalo, because I'm sure he's in touch with you, the reference, because these are fascinating results. And I think this low equilibrium Pakistan and other countries are stuck in, I mean, we could move to a higher equilibrium with expanding this kind of successful experiments, and we'll tweet on these papers. I'm looking at Gonzalo because he has many more followers than I do. Okay, thank you very much. I'm being reminded we have 7 minutes left, but let's go back to demand and firms. So, Mr. Mohammed Iqbal, if you can tell us, how can firms be, they phrase me the question as be pushed, let's say incentivized, I prefer incentivized, to hire more women? What lessons can be learned from sectors, for example, textile, where some firms have managed to increase female employment? I was mentioning Bangladesh having higher rates. Mostly it's driven by the garment sector. What can we do to reduce this at the firm level? A few ideas quickly. I'm sorry for the time limit.
In a couple of years or 3 years, they will, or in a few years, they will run out of able-bodied men to jobs. So Pakistan's economy has not been growing. So it's difficult for even men folks who are traditionally the breadwinners and the family member who goes outside. So in a depressed economic environment, they will be the ones, women will be the first ones to lose the job, in a way, at times. So the external environment should also be helping the situation so that they need more hands. It's all hands on the deck situation. So this is important. So if the economy is operating at a suboptimal level, then the vulnerable groups will suffer first. The other thing is regarding the employability of women and the number of kind of the better situation in education in Pakistan, which has definitely improved over all these years. But if I am an employer, I put an ad out. Some of my factories have maybe, some part of their business, they have 80% women. And the same factory, you go into a different building, there are very few. And the guy, the owner and the operator, he's a very fair person. He's blind to this thing. You go to another factory, a second-tier factory or tier-3 factory, the guy knows in his mind that something needs to be done. But he is operating in an environment that is difficult to nudge him just across the line to go start hiring this thing. He genuinely thinks he's not ready. He's maybe 50 years behind. So what can the society do to make sure that more women are employed? That is, the society should do its job. Transportation, for example, it's a big cost. If somebody wants to work and come into my factory, it's a one-off cost to make sure that everything women need, the kind of environment, separate bathrooms are there. It's a one-off cost. I've done this thing, it is there. Beyond that, it's not a recurring cost. The other thing, as I said, okay, look at Pakistan's National Assembly and Senate. They have female quota for how many years? There are women representing senators and National Assembly members representing that. But the situation on the ground is there are not many female candidates still, because only the female candidates are which have their family members there. So society has to play its role, and of course the buyers have to play their role. Because in some cases, buyers, they have all kinds of audits, and the companies, in the beginning, they were reluctant, then they saw the light, and they're very willing. Actually, some of the companies that I know of, and Mr. Zulkarnain is here, his company, the leading light is, as far as this particular environment is concerned, they've gone out of the way. They know that if there's a downtime, I have to let people go. I have to rehire them 6 months later, or 3 months later, 4 months later. So why not find this time and can retrain them? Because this is my resource I've invested on them. So even businessmen have to have a long-term view beyond 3 months or 6 months. But again, the society has to come up and defray some of those costs. But we cannot legislate per se that, okay, that there has to be a quota. We just make sure that there's no discrimination. That is the care thing, that there's no discrimination.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ali, before we move to a few minutes of exchange with the room, you'll have the last word on a difficult question. Based on what you heard, if in the current constrained fiscal environment, if you had to advise the Prime Minister for the next budget, where should the next billion rupees be spent to address this issue and increase female labor force participation? What would you recommend? Connectivity, transport, we heard many things, supporting firms, bear some of the costs of childcare. Where would you spend it? Skills?
I think, and this is more, I think, colored by my own experiences, I would spend that money in reconfiguring our police stations. I would like women to have access to security and be able to easily walk into a police station and report harassment and have that be acted upon rather than for us to neglect that. Because until you put that foundation in place, a lot of the other things that we've talked about are assuming that you've got some stability in the power relationship there. The other place that I perhaps would, this might not be the first thing that comes to mind, but I would spend that money on opening up the economy more, because I think opening up the economy more, because I think that it is, and in my own experience, I've been doing a project with Karan Das on looking at job quality. And one of the findings was that firms that export more are much more sensitive to creating that space for women. And I think it makes economic sense also.
Excellent. Thank you. By both, I think the first one you can add to the list of recommendations of the report. I'm not sure it's there at that level, so thank you. Let's open it up for a few minutes, even if we went over time. Please, short question to this esteemed panel or short answer. And not only in the front, but I saw the first hand, please. And then okay, I'm trying. So we'll take 5, but please be short so that we can afford 5. Thank you. Thank you.
I just wanted to make a comment to what Dr. Alia said. I think there is ample supply of able women available in the market. So there is no problem with the supply side. There are 2 points which I want to point out. I think there is a misconception that hiring women is more costly and there's more turnover. So in women, if out of 100, 3 or 4 leave because of their family reasons, there are 50 who are not leaving because of commercial reasons. While men leave, the turnover in men is much higher. Similarly, why is Bangladesh hiring more women? Are they not productive? They are more productive. So I think the cost which we invest on women actually is received back. We have to understand that. Yeah. And unless the businessmen start to understanding it, it's not going to change. We have to make them understand it's more profitable also.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hire women.
Thank you.
Just one more comment. I think we have the society has a bias against women for the last 4 decades.
Okay.
The segregation we have created has created the difficulties which we have.
It's nothing to do with the religion. Why Bangladesh has so much of? So I think we have to change our curriculums, change our thoughts.
Thank you very much. On your first point, actually, that could be an interesting research. Maybe we should contribute to that, to document that it's not more costly and there's no higher turnover when you hire women. It would be good to document it, to kill this myth. So maybe an area for future research. I think there was a lady who had a question.
I would like to make a short comment.
Oh,
yeah.
Who? Sorry?
I would like to make a short comment.
Yes, sorry, please, please. Okay. I'd like to respect the order of
no
how fast hands were raised. So the lady in the table behind, yes, there, exactly. But please be short.
Thank you. I'll try to keep it brief. So I'm representing PASHA, which is Pakistan's IT Sector Trade Association, and we represent a currently very lucrative sector which can help turn around things for the economy. I just want to raise here that when we're talking about talent accumulation and specifically women, because I represent the IT sector, I think it's important to have discussions around sector-specific requirements for talent as well, because when we discuss the IT sector, it offers great opportunity for women because a large amount of our work is remote, and this offers this opportunity to the women at home to work. So we might also want to look at specific sector requirements. We're talking about agriculture, textile. Certain sectors have specific requirements, and then focusing on policies within those sectors, because while certain sectors operate on an industrial model, some operate on a knowledge economy model, and we've also discussed that. Secondly, another comment here is that, Dr. Alia, you said that the employer needs to think from a perspective of treating men and women fairly at the workplace. I also feel like, as someone who, as a female myself, that while the society, there's certain societal norms that govern the way women work or respond to work requirements. Probably those also need to be taken care of at the corporate or employer side. And a reconciliation is required that will probably take a while for women and men to be treated fairly or at the same manner in the workplace. And I'd like to hear your thoughts about that.
Thank you. I'm realizing I'm having zero authority to impose short interventions, so please, short. Thank you. These are good points. But also question to the panel. So far it's comments, but please be short. 15 seconds. I'm going to count.
First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting and presenting this wonderful report by World Bank and Tabadla and inviting us here. I'm glad that both sessions, both panels put stress on education, the importance of education to make a progress in economics. It is true. So specifically, we are debating here gender like female opportunities in our society. So I would like to add up you, 12.8 million girls are out of school in Pakistan right now. And it is 54% of the population who are supposed to attend the school. If I talk about corporate sector always encouraged to employ. I am Zahid from, sorry to...
I'm sorry, if I can ask you to ask the question or make directly your point. Apologies for that.
I'm putting myself. Corporate sector always encouraged to get employment for the woman, for the female gender. But very disappointingly, the continuity of job is not very certain. Because of some of circumstances, they get married, they got some house problems and some
Okay,
sort of
so you think turnover is high? Does the panel agree with that? Do you want to answer to
the
that?
government should make sure that if a corporate sector give them employment, they must continue their job.
So you're saying turnover is high. Previously we heard that was a myth. We need a study on that. But any evidence that confirms the myth or kill it from the panel?
What I'm
Sorry,
going to say is based on, the research that is really becoming very important post-COVID, and that is the importance of the care economy. That yes, women have both a productive and a reproductive aspect to their lives. However, the reproductive role needs to be facilitated through a proper care economy. And I think this is, I mean, men have a higher turnover because of other reasons also, so it should be statistically investigated through data as to which hypothesis really holds. We are not here to contest, but I think there are ways, and then there are flexi-time working arrangements. Women have to get support from the employer in order to work. It is widely accepted in order to increase their labor force participation.
Thank you. So Dr. Ali asked us, the men, to listen more to women on this question, but I'm seeing only men raise their hands. So women, please come in. So we have one here, and then the lady there, and then I'm afraid I'm gonna have to close. We're way over time. Please, at that table. That's okay, Sarah. Okay,
Yeah, I wanted to make a short comment and would like to know what you guys think about this. You asked a question in your final discussion that how would you like the government to spend the next 1 billion to improve, which would have the greatest social impact. So I think that 1 billion should go into public transport because the advantages would be three-pronged. First, we would save on our import bill. Second, it brings an element of social justice and social mobility in our society. And third, the environment. And this has been recently done in Gilgit-Baltistan, where the hindrance in gender inequality are much, the cultural aspects of it are much higher. And the dividends from that have been really good. So I would like to know your thoughts about that.
Thank you very much. Just a brief comment on the question coming from this table. A few days back, I came across a post on LinkedIn that said that Sweden recently got a 26-year-old female climate minister. And the subject of the post was that in Pakistan, one cannot assume such a portfolio unless and until we cross our 40s. Unfortunately, to some extent, I have to agree with this, situation. So, we need to accept the employers. All the problems which are from the supply side are well mentioned in the report, and I totally agree from that. But on the demand side, we need to realize that our firms, our employers are ready to employ women. Are they going to trust them with huge projects? We need to also realize that in Pakistan, women are going to get married at some point of their career. They are going to have children at some point of their career. Pakistan is one of the fastest growing economies in terms of its population, so this trend is going to continue. So the employers should come up with such terms of references in context of maternity leave, parental leave. Even if it's there, the implementation is difficult. So trust me, if this transition continues, no passionate woman is going to quit work. Thank you.
Different kinds of employers within one industry, within one sector, within one city, even within the same industry. As I mentioned, some don't have any issue at all. It's not even an issue for them. But some of them, they live in a different world. Unless they are dragged out of that, and as somebody just mentioned, it's part of the opening of the economy. If you compare exporters versus people who sell locally, the difference is starkly clear. Because there's a demand, market asks them, what are you doing about climate, about gender balance and those things? Here they can get away with it, and they will keep getting away with it. How do we do that? Do we involve tax dollars or tax rupees to do that? It's a political decision. But as an employer, I should be gender blind. It's purely qualification based, that's it. And most of my members are, or almost all of them are.
Thank you very much. Maybe one last. I know the gentleman on the table behind. I'm sorry. With the apologies. Actually, I'll give you the right word. Go ahead. But really short, please. I see you taking a piece of paper.
Hi. So this is Syed Hasnain Raza. I'm representing a media project on conservation, environment, and nature. And I have a question that how we are going to make sure economic security when the women are at the forefront of climate crisis. Given the circumstances, two examples, we have 3 million climate-induced migrations in Thatta, Badin, Garochan, and 27 million flood affectees. There are women as well, and half of them are women. and I've documented this.
Is that a question on climate?
Yeah.
That's a very important topic, but that's not the topic of the panel. I'm sorry.
With regard to the women, because
yes.
they are
So a question on women
forefront,
participation.
So how we are going to make sure that economic security, because these communities, they're the women who are working side with the men in their farmlands, and when they are not being able to work, how like you minus those women and those people from the there, and then how you're going to make sure the economic security, because they are adding to the economy and agriculture sector.
Do you want to take it? No. Okay. I'll give you the last word, and then I really need to close. We're 15 minutes over time.
Well, thank you very much. This is Dr. Suhail. 3 quick points. There's no doubt that women are a vector of productivity. Let's not discuss it. We see it in hiring practices also. But we need to align it with another vector of productivity, which is the provision of minimum social security. That's what Mr. Zulkarnain has been talking about. So, number 1 point, that we must now take the provision of social security as enshrined in law seriously. Our coverage of social security is hardly 5%. Overall, that must change. Point number 2, we have not succeeded in taking the social security to informal economy worker, and there have been efforts now from traditional social protection side to take it there, as long as we do not link provision of social protection with work and take it out of the household and build it on the work, we would not have the desired impact and securities that women should have.
Thank you.
The third and last one is that still we are applying gender lens to the women participation in the workforce. Now in the cities and the services sector, there's a large number of women who are there. We have to talk about women workers' solidarity and organize that women should take care of the other women in work for their rights. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's time to close. We're over time. Apologies to the young gentleman. I'll come to you to hear your point, because I'm interested. Your hand was up. I'd like to thank this excellent panel. I think this was including Dr. Farah, who joined us from Lahore. This was a very rich discussion. Good suggestions. Any papers you mentioned, please send it to us. This is a topic where there's no silver bullet. Still, this debate could go on for the rest of the afternoon. But a round of applause to the panel. And new round of applause to the authors of the report. Thank you very much all for joining. Thank you to the organizers, to Tabadlab as well for excellent organization, and to the whole team who made this happen. You're welcome to join us for lunch and continue this heated debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Just a couple of quick closing remarks. My thanks again to Mr. Benhassine and the panelists. The first thing is the CEM report is hyper accessible. You can find physical copies of it outside at the reception. You can find it in both Urdu and English, the full version and the executive summary. And secondly, you can find links to this report online across our social media in all posts related to this particular event. Thank you, and yes, please do join us for lunch.
In Pakistan, only 24% of women participate in the labor market. This makes Pakistan a notable outlier when it comes to female labor force participation. Worldwide, there is only 9 countries that display lower rates of female labor force participation than Pakistan. One of the key reasons for this is that there are gender norms that prevent women from participating in the labor market and working normally. The country economic memorandum for Pakistan shows that these gender norms are a real cost to the economy. because they limit the number of people that contribute to the generation of economic output. We estimate that if Pakistan were able to close the female labor force participation gap with respect to other countries at similar levels of development, it could generate up to 19 million new jobs. This would in turn boost GDP by up to 23%, particularly if the jobs that were to be generated for women were in paid waged employment.
So what policies can be put in place to increase female employment in firms and boost female labor force participation in Pakistan? The World Bank has been working to rigorously evaluate the potential of providing wage subsidies to firms in Pakistan to hire women. In partnership with the Pakistan-based jobs platform Rozi.pk, we have been conducting an experiment in which some firms are offered a modest 6-month wage subsidy if they hire a woman for an open technical or professional position. Preliminary results suggest that the wage subsidies have great potential. On average, firms increased hiring of women by 12 percentage points. And among firms that were previously male-only, female hiring increased by 30 percentage points. The World Bank will support the government of Pakistan to scale this successful program for transformational change in the labor market for Pakistani women.